Okay, count of three. Today is the first episode of Prehistory, a Traveler's Guide podcast for the month of October. I am your host, Greg Noneman, and on the panel today, I am welcoming back to the show after a absence for a small time, my buddy Samuel Eiler. Say howdy.
Hello. Nice to see you all again.
And welcoming back to the podcast, we are once again playing host to Kaiju Transmission's own Kyle Byrd.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be back.
Of course, because we're going to be talking about an unmade Godzilla film tonight. So keep posting about that. And for two new people joining the party, I'm welcoming an amazing author from Roswell, New Mexico, the author of the Big Book of Japanese Giant Monster Movies, The Lost Films, and many others, Mr. John LeMay.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure, John. Lost films are kind of your specialty, so that's what you're here for. And then, lastly, bringing in another very cool guy that I also got, cool cat that I got to meet at G-Fest. He has written the book Kaiju for Hipsters and also runs the Mazer Patrol blog and podcast, Mr. Kevin Derendorf.
Hey, good to be here.
And of course, for our esteemed guest of honor today, we are welcoming one of Hollywood's most prolific special effects artists, perhaps best known for his work on Carnosaur, The Blob 1988, the Jack Nicholson film Wolf, the 1989 Pet Sematary remake, but we are here primarily to discuss his work on the Carnosaur films and the unmade 1994 American Godzilla film from director John DeBunt. He is Jeff Farley. Welcome back, man.
Hey, it's good to be back and nice to see and meet everybody else.
Yes, indeed. We've had a lot of correspondence on Facebook leading up to now, but now you can have the show all to yourself, Jeff. So as per usual, just tell us how you got started in special effects and how your impactful meeting with Forey Ackerman led you to the path that you now embark on.
It started with a viewing of King Kong when I was a kid, and I remember seeing a snippet of Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, but it wasn't until the film Equinox had been released, and my parents begrudgingly took me to see it, and I found out that it had been shot like around the area that I grew up in, so I started scouring the phone book, and because I already had a connection with Forey Ackerman, I basically started calling and bugging these guys, and one thing led to another, and I ended up helping out on a film called Kingdom of the Spiders, and then I just kind of spent the rest of my life basically pursuing this career, and so that was sort of the start of this whole crazy mess.
Yeah, I know. Tell us about your first meeting with the associate producer of Planet of Dinosaurs, Jim Pearl, and how that has also influenced you in your career.
Gosh, my stepmother had noticed in our local newspaper. I grew up in Glendale, in California, and it's a suburb of Los Angeles. And she says, "Hey, there's going to be some stop motion animators at the Eagle Rock Library tonight, and we're going. And get your stuff together, and let's hop in the car and get over there." And him and Steve Cherkis also, and another guy named Bob Costa, who was an old optical effects guy, like a legend in the industry, who also happened to own a comic book store that him and his wife owned that I ended up working at for a while. But basically, they showed some really cool stuff, some scenes from films, some stuff that they had done. and had some puppets with them. And this is probably my first experience actually seeing, an actual stop motion puppets. And I think they had a Gort from Day the Earth Stood Still, which was used, I believe, on the cover of an album. It was really cool seeing props like that, especially at such a young age. But from there, Jim gave me his number, and it was the number at the studio at Planet of the Dinosaurs, and I think once a week for I don't know how many weeks I'd call them and just bug them. So, and Jim was really nice and offered all kinds of advice and I can't remember any specific stories, but it was really cool getting to talk to him all that time.
That's very cool. Are there any other stories you'd like to share regarding other big name stop motion animators like Danforth, Harryhausen, and the late David Allen?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned all three of them. But since I knew Forey Ackerman, we would go down there and hang out. But he called me and he calls me one night out of the blue and says, "Hey, Ray Harryhausen's going to be here New Year's Eve, and I'm inviting you over." And so of course I went there and met him. And this was months before Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger had been released. So it was about the time that I had met Ray for the first time, and just really, 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 really cool night. I'll never forget it. It's fuzzy memories about the time when you're 14 to the time that you're in your 50s. So, but I just remember being really very cool, and Ray taking the time to look at stuff that I brought and offer advice, and just nice to kind of be in his presence for I think a couple hours or so. Maybe it's an hour, maybe 90 minutes or so, but that sort of led to me taking the plunge to meet Jim Danforth again through Forey. But Jim and Dave Allen both, and Dennis Murin's phone numbers are all in my local phone book. So that's how I met those guys. Is I just gave him a call and it just started from there.
Yep, it all depends on the people that you know.
Yeah. I feel so jaded now because I didn't realize how cool, kind of cool it was when I was a kid. It just seemed like a normal childhood to me. It would be nice, if every one of us had those experiences. I mean, and I think it's the people that you meet when you're sort of forming your life. But it was just very, very fortunate that I got to spend some time with these guys and pick their brains.
So before we get on to Carnosaur, I've done some digging here, and you eventually ended up at the workshop of John Carl Buechler, and this took you to Italy for the sci-fi film Arena, where you got to help Screaming Mad George and Steve Wang. This also eventually led you to working on a Japanese production called Tokyo: The Last War. Would you like to tell us about your time working through all that?
Oh yeah, that was really fun. I mean, I spent maybe a couple of years going over to John's place and interviewing with him. So I got to get to know him before I started to work there. But my real goal was to go to Italy, and I had an opportunity to work on the Friday the 13th film that John directed, but there was also the opportunity to go to Italy, and I decided to do that instead. But while we were there, George and Steve both needed some extra help rehearsing the creature that they had brought over, and so I volunteered some time a Saturday and helped them rehearse the scenes, and then ended up playing part of the creature's anatomy. And it was really cool, but I was working over at Lance Anderson's after that, and I got a phone call from George saying that he is going to Japan to do a film, and they were already pretty much ready to go, but he needed an extra person to go with him to fill out the crew, and would I want to go? And since my time at Lance's was going to be over pretty soon, I said, of course. It'd be stupid to turn it down, but it turned out to be this film that was pretty much made for the Japanese market, although it was the sequel to another film that had an American release, a video release. It's really let's see if I can remember. It was Taito Monogatari was the first film, and then the one that I worked on was called Taito Taisen, and this is from a series of novels that were sort of considered the guy was considered the Japanese Stephen King, but while we were there, we found out that the next film that some of the crew members were going on to was Godzilla versus Biollante, which was starting production probably about a month or so after we wrapped up. So, of course, I wanted to stay and work on it, but that was out of the cards. And it wasn't until a few years later, about '94, that I got the job through a guy named Mike Hood at Precision Effects to do some figures for Trendmasters, some of their Godzilla Wars bendy figures. So while we were working on that is when Mike had received the call from Sony Imageworks to work on the footage for their effects test for the Godzilla project, and because it was such an incredibly short amount of time, he decided to give me a call and ask if I would jump in and do basically a full body sculpture, and because we were on friendly terms with the people who were making it, we'd already worked with them before. They had no problem hiring me onto it also. So me and Chris Bergschneider and Dirk von Besser spent about 3 days putting this clay sculpture, which was essentially a recasting of a Horizon kit that Steve Wang had sculpted. There was just no time to do a real full body sculpt, but they felt confident, in us just remolding this thing and casting it up, and then basically having 3 days to put this thing together and ship a clay sculpture off to Utah, where they would scan it and digitize it and use it for their test. To this day, I've never seen it, but I was told he's stomping around the MGM parking lot.
Okay, I suppose this is where we can begin our first big discussion on the Bonds Godzilla film. This is where I'll let John LeMay start things off.
Sure, just for our listeners, if they need a little history, in the early 1990s, TriStar negotiated with Toho to do this wonderful, what I think would have been a wonderful American remake of Godzilla. Had a great script by Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, where Godzilla is this genetically engineered dinosaur that's left over by aliens, and he fights this alien monster named the Griffin. And as much as I actually like the 1998 Godzilla that came out, I know this would have been so much better. And our guest Jeff, his design for Godzilla was very much, like he said, in line with the Heisei Godzilla. And Jeff, a question that I have for you, even though I know you were more on the design end of things, I was hoping you could confirm a rumor that I heard that before they created the Griffin as the main antagonist, did you ever hear that King Ghidorah was originally the main antagonist of the film?
I can honestly say that I had not heard that, but I wouldn't doubt it, because from what I understand, DuPont was already very familiar with Godzilla and the series, and called himself a fan. And I would think that, especially with the script writers, who really would be a better foil for Godzilla than King Ghidorah himself.
Yeah, and apparently the story was that Toho allowed Sony to use basically any monster they wanted other than King Ghidorah, Mothra, and Rodan, because they felt they could license those separately. So technically, I guess Sony could have used like Megalon, for instance, or something like that, which I find very, very interesting.
Yeah, maybe they could have used Anguirus, or another familiar creature that. But who knows? I mean, who knows? These are Hollywood types, so who knows what goes on in their minds.
And I know that Byrd, he probably has some better questions than I do about the movie. But before we lose track of Godzilla, I just wanted to say that I loved your Trendmasters bendable figures, because I grew up in that area of the Imperial Godzilla figure. That was all I had for many years. And then when I was 10 years old, I saw all these amazing figures. And I actually saw those before I saw the regular hard figures. I saw the bendable figures first. But something I wanted to ask you is that you said in an interview that Trendmasters kind of set some guidelines on you, and you didn't really feel like they were on the right track, and you deviated from that. And I think you said that they changed your design of Rodan and King Ghidorah for the toys, and I was hoping maybe you could kind of go into some more detail on that if you still remember.
Yeah, they sent these drawings, and it was really, I mean, what you received in the package is pretty much what their designs looked like. When I got the job, I took a trip to Little Tokyo, and my friends and I, and we set about and found some, the bookstores, and found some really good current reference on Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, well, what would become Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2 in the States. And there were all kinds of great photos of the characters. I mean, they were very clear, and I went out to hell with what they sent me. It's like, the fans don't want this. They want the real thing. And so I set about to make them look more like their filmed counterparts. And and I think they told me, I think they said they might change stuff, and they did some subtle changes on the Mothra and the Mechagodzilla, but those remained pretty true to what the original sculptures were. I was a little disappointed that they went in and changed those things, but I just thought the heads looked really kind of goofy the way that they had wanted them. And I ended up losing in that battle, but I have some photos somewhere and packed away, and one day I'll dig them out and share them. But it was really cool. It was, I mean, it's like, I never thought I'd ever get a chance to be involved in anything like that. So just the experience alone was well worth it. And this was actually right before I left for Romania to do the Primevals. So that was another, that was a big summer for me for that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I know fans would love to see those pictures. If you ever do go to the trouble to dig them out, we would love to see them. And I have one more question, and then I think Byrd should probably ask his questions about the movie. But when I Google your name with Godzilla, one of the first things that pops up is actually a headshot of Rodan, which I've never seen before. And maybe that is one of your Trendmasters designs that leaked onto the web or something. But it's on Wikizilla. It's a headshot of Rodan, and it says that Jeff Farley designed it. I just didn't know if you could confirm that.
That was probably just something I did. I was just playing around on Photoshop. I had just got Photoshop, and I was playing around. I did a Godzilla also, which I think was attached to the the '94 film too. But no, those are really just like just for fun, really. But it's really cool that people picked up on it and liked it. I mean, what more fun would it be to be able to design those characters and be involved in them in some way, shape, or form? It's for some of it's you just grow up dreaming that stuff, and if you get involved, it's just a stroke of luck. That's all.
I would like to throw something out real quick. I really feel that I have to thank you for this, Jeff. But the bendable Godzilla toys, the Trendmaster got them made.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the bendable Godzilla was actually the very first Godzilla toy that I ever had as a child, and I still have it even today.
That's awesome.
I would like to thank you for that very much. I owe you a thank you.
You're really welcome. I had the Aurora model kit growing up. That was, my first one was the long box Godzilla that had the that mauve purplish plastics, and I regret the day that thing disappeared, because now it's probably worth something. But yeah, it's I think we all remember our first Godzilla toys.
Yeah.
Oh yes, the Trendmasters, the Imperials that I still have.
Yeah. I love collecting the tiny figures, the really like the very small pieces. I have a collection of the different characters, and the sculpture is just really so well done and so accurate. It's those are just lots of fun. They're a lot easier to store too than the big ones.
So when you were working on those, were you sculpting at home and then sending things to Trendmasters, or at the Trendmasters home base for working on them? How did that all work out?
No, they just satellited everything out. Mike's shop was based in Sun Valley, and I had a shop in my garage. So much easier. I prefer working at home or not going too far. It's so much easier than driving into work. But at that time I didn't have any air conditioning, and it was just a terrible summer. And I remember regretting sculpting those things in Super Sculpey, because it would dry out and start cracking, and we'd have to fix them, and it was kind of miserable. I wish we'd just gone for epoxy putty on them or something, but in the end we got everything to work out and fixed it up. But I'll tell you, it's like I don't ever want to work anywhere without air conditioning again.
With the '94 film, I know Stan Winston had done some maquettes, and he was, doing a lot of the effects work. Did you get a chance to have any real hands-on interaction with him at all?
No, unfortunately not. I did. Stan. I met Stan maybe once when I was at Lance Anderson's, and we had a nice talk. He was a funny guy. He really fancied himself a comedian. But I had gotten offered a job on Terminator 2 through the stunt team, and they said I had to talk to Stan about it, and that was an interesting situation. He I think he called production afterwards and said, I'll do these things myself. So, but something, he was the right guy to go to for that job, because he was really so well equipped, and the studio, he had the best people, and he had all the money in the world. Yeah. So it was always Stan's job. So but again, how lucky could a kid be to just have some involvement.
The pictures that are floating around of that, are those true to your design at all? They usually get credited as Stan Winston's Godzilla, and I'm sure you've seen them.
Well, that painted maquette that you see, that came from Stan's shop. That was, I believe, a Crash McCreary design. And mine is a clay sculpture, and there's a photo of it on the which website is that? The story, basically the 4-part story on it. There you go. sci-fi-japan.com. Thanks Greg, for saving me.
Yep.
My research team is away right now, so.
Did you have any hand in the designs for the griffin creature at all?
No, unfortunately, no. I really wish that I would have been on that, but again, all the photos that I've seen of the designs, I mean, really, I couldn't have done any better. They're really cool. It was a cool design creature. My fiance almost sneezed. She wants to get involved. So.
Okay. So as for, I was about to say, the griffin, the maquettes of the griffin that I've seen on that article, that was one scary looking little monster, to put it lightly. But in the concept art, I think it looks just even a tad better under the penmanship of Carlos Huante. That's one of my questions about Godzilla 94. Did you have any experiences working with any of the concept artists like Ricardo Delgado and Huante and Russell and company?
I hate to disappoint you guys, but no, everything that I did was 3 days in my garage. That was really, again, at the time I wasn't sure where I fit in. I just knew that it was for Godzilla. And I think at the time I'd hoped that maybe I would have been up for it. That was more wishful thinking than anything. Because we had heard that Stan, was going to be involved, and but again, what I had made was for Sony ImageWorks to secure the job, because even though it was coming, the film was going to be produced through Sony, they still had to bid on the job. It just didn't automatically go to them. So it's kind of sad. They wouldn't just go to their guys first, especially since they did fine work. But I guess, everybody's got to prove that they can come in at a price. And we, but it was an important, I guess it was an important job in some ways, because it established it, and it did secure them work eventually. And I'm very happy to have just had some small involvement.
Okay. So I take it you didn't really have any kind of communication with DeBont or anything like that?
No, unfortunately. Again, I mean, I don't even know if he was aware that I was involved, but I'm sure he saw the work. I mean, I'm sure that they all saw the finished product. And again, I'd love to find out if if that footage exists somewhere out there. I mean, I've looked it up, and I mean, I thought at least somewhere it might be, like, online somewhere, but so far I haven't even found it. I know that was a Data Point or Data View or like Data Point View Labs or something in Utah did the actual scanning and then all the digitization. Pardon me while I fumble a word. It was done over at in Culver City at Sony. But I'd love to see it. It sounded like a really cool thing, and I mean, if somebody can track it down, please feel free to let me know.
Get on it, guys.
That was my fiance, though. She said, "Get on it." So. But like I said, it's like that was right before I went off to do the Primevals, which I really had a lot of involvement in, that was, I mean, 9 weeks in Romania, shooting and supervising all the makeup effects, as well as playing quite a few of the hominid roles in the film. So that was Godzilla became kind of a forgotten thing at that point, and it wasn't even until years later, after the Godzilla '98 had been released, that I even remembered that had been involved in the '94 one. But pretty soon after that, I mean, I ended up. Was it even before that? No, it was before that we shot Carnosaur. It's like Carnosaur was like a few years before.
Yeah, in the Sci-Fi Japan article, you are quoted as having saying, quote, Sony wanted to keep the classic original design and define his body structure more musculature when it came to the potential design for Godzilla in the '94 script.
Mm-hmm. Specifically for that, because at the time, like I said, I was aware that Stan was involved, but I just had no idea what they were doing. And it wasn't until years later, I mean, that I saw it. I love their design. And as much as I really love the design that Bill Stout did for his version, that never got off the ground, the Steve Miner one. It was just something that they suggested to us. We broke it down. I mean, I concentrated on the head, and then Chris the body, and Dirk the tail. Chris had built an armature basically out of brass tubing that we could break all the parts down individually, work on them, then put them all back together, and then finish it up, as one piece before it got shipped off. But it was, it was an interesting little job, because I don't really kind of have any clear idea of what I was going to do when I started it. And that was sort of when I worked on the head and gave it kind of a furrowed brow, kind of a, angled little 45-degree angle. And then I kind of lowered the corner of the mouth and kind of gave him a little more of a scowl, which they loved. They thought it was a really great touch, and had Mike Hood alter his sculpture, because he was doing a larger scale head, and had him alter his design to match the one that I was doing. So, it would have been really cool. I mean, if it had come out and that had been the version that we had done. But that's, again, wishful thinking, and Stan would have done an amazing job.
Indeed. I'd say it would have been a visual feast to have seen this fully realized with the effects of the time, especially the climatic battle in New York City with Godzilla and the Griffin. That would have really had been something else.
Well, I guess, what they had already cast Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt for it, and then it was because of them getting cast and the film falling apart, they were held over for Twister. So it worked out for them.
And for our reference, Bill Paxton, I believe, would have been playing the role of the Dr. Aaron Vaught, the cryptozoologist, and I think the actress would have been playing the role of Jill Llewellyn, the widow of Keith Llewellyn, who was killed by Godzilla when he first awakens up in the North Pole.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So here, do you think we've concluded all things Godzilla 1994, or do you want to go on with your other questions, Kyle?
Well, I just have a couple that I can knock out real quick.
Sure.
So did you get a chance to read through the screenplay, and what was your opinion of the script, if you actually got a chance to look through the whole thing?
Well, unfortunately, they never sent us a script for that, but I did see it years later, and I thought it would have been really exciting. Because again, I think it really boils down to the filmmaker and what their intent is, because it's well known that Roland Emmerich really had no interest. I think Dean Devlin was more interested in Godzilla than Roland Emmerich, and the film is only half as good as it could be because of Dean Devlin's involvement. But to have somebody involved who really actually is excited by the material, and from the fact that Twister did so well at the box office, I really think it would have, I think it really would have done well had it been made. I think the audiences would have enjoyed it, and it's so ironic too that the film died because of the budget. And you look at the budgets of films these days, it's really sad that they weren't willing to just risk it at that moment.
Well, and also the budget for the '98 movie, especially when you count non-production costs like marketing and stuff, was at least something like maybe like double of what the '94 version would have been.
Exactly, and it's funny because in a few years the economy, changes, and Hollywood is a beast that always has to be fed, and what we see these days, just doesn't seem as exciting as it used to be. So it's a really sad missed opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that can also be boiled up to who was in charge at Sony and TriStar at the time. A lot of that is mentioned in the Sci-Fi Japan article.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems pretty typical considering. Look what happened with the regime change at Warner Brothers when the Valley of Gwangi was ready to be released. It just suddenly became unimportant.
And as I was about to say, the Sony executives, they were kind of clueless about Godzilla really to begin with. They didn't really understand his popularity with us fans here in the West. They thought we would want this, but in reality, their ideas were extremely laughably dumb, to put it lightly. One of their so-called bright ideas was to do a Batman and Robin style Godzilla film, if you know what I'm getting at there.
like Mania would have played Robin.
Something like that. Yes, that's in I think part 3 or part 4 of the Sci-Fi Japan scoop.
I have to go back and reread that. It's been so long.
Yeah, the idea was, since Godzilla was so costly, that their crazy futile hope was that if the sidekick that they created for Godzilla was popular, they could do a spin-off movie on him, and then they didn't have to pay for Godzilla. I think that was their thinking.
Yeah, well, considering what I've encountered, it's they don't always have the best ideas. Leave the good ideas for the creative people, and let the bean counters write the checks.
Yeah, it's from what I've read in the article, it seems that everybody that was involved in the '94 film was a Godzilla fan prior to going on to the project, or became a Godzilla fan during the course of filming. And so I felt this film would have been in perfect hands with DeBont and Company. And if the film had been made, I think Toho would have probably entrusted those guys to have made possibly a MonsterVerse as early as the 1990s. But we had to wait 20 years before Legendary finally got it right.
So funny too, because there was already a MonsterVerse with Toho. They didn't have to invent it because they already did.
Yeah, true. Toho did. Toho and Universal beat us to the punch for having a cinematic MonsterVerse. True.
I don't like to think of it that way. I just to enjoy the films and because I feel that so much of that is based upon these guys so worried about their jobs. If they don't come up with something big, it's their asses are on the line, but it's become more of a follow the leader sort of mentality. And even then, I think the leaders aren't really leading. I don't really think that we need any of that. I think we just need the films themselves, and we don't need the hype to go with it.
Yeah, that's true. But if it's any consolation, the director of the upcoming Godzilla King of the Monsters, Mike Doherty, is a big kaiju devotee and a rather prominent Godzilla fan. So you're going to be in for a treat there, considering it's got the cast of Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster in its kaiju cast.
Yeah, I think it's going to be cool. I mean, my fiance and I, we saw Godzilla in the theater, and of course Kong Skull Island, and we'll be in the line to see Godzilla King of the Monsters and whatever else comes up. Because it's funny because I don't believe the advertising lives up to the films themselves. I just have to go and not buy into any of the advertising and just keep an open mind and then just get pleasantly surprised watching the film and see that they are enjoyable. And it's maybe it's a comforting thing that B movies were always the way to go to begin with, and now they're getting A-list budgets.
And the year after King of the Monsters, Godzilla and King Kong are finally having their, how many years has it been? 40 plus year rematch?
Yeah, maybe I should invest in peanuts and popcorn, and maybe some bananas also, and rake it in big. Well, I don't know. I'm going in with an open mind. I don't, we'll see what happens. I hope they, maybe they'll have more story about the red berries or something. So.
Well, there's a little bit of a connection to the '94 film with Godzilla versus Kong. I'm going to mention here real quick.
Yeah.
Terry Rossio is actually got attached to head the writers' room for Godzilla vs. Kong, along with a who's who of some prominent sci-fi writers to come up with the movie's script and story.
Big ape meets big lizard. They battle it out. The end. It seems pretty simple to me. So,
anyhow, who here is do we have any more questions for Godzilla 94, or are we ready to start jumping into the Carnosaur retrospective?
I'm wrapped up on Godzilla. I'm ready to go to Carnosaur if the rest of you guys are.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, here now let's begin with the first film in the series, Carnosaur from 1993. Just fire. Let Sam start with this one, since he's got the Carnosaur questions.
What was it like working on all three Carnosaur films?
Well, unfortunately, I only worked on the first one. I have a very sad story to go with it, but of course, I sort of worked on all of them, considering they reused my my work, over and over again, all the way up into Dinosaur Island. So it was like working on those again, because John would pull those puppets out and clean them up and stick them in front of a camera again. But I was hired originally by John to sculpt the T-Rex, and as well as supervise the lab for the show. But there was a budget cut in the show, and at $100 a day, I was deemed too expensive, so I had to be let go. But that was after I got a lot of work done on it, but I think it was just as the full scale one was being constructed. But I have some people for you guys to talk to that will be able to fill in a lot of gaps. So I've already told Greg about them. So
The gentleman in question are Kenneth Hall, who supervised the full-size Tyrannosaurs, and the other was the physical effects supervisor, Anthony Dublin.
Yes. Yes, I was talking to Ken recently, and I know that he's more than willing to spill the beans, and those guys will be able to give you a lot of good info. But ask me what you will, and I'll try to answer the best I can.
Okay, here, reading.
Greg, can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah. So, sorry for
Novel. I was just reading from the Dinosaur filmography in the production section here and figuring out how this production got started. And it's described here as, quote, Roger Corman's low-budget entry into the genetically engineered dinosaur market got to start 3 years earlier when he discovered the novel Carnosaur during a book signing tour, then secured the rights. Can you want to tell us a little bit more about how he came to find out about the Carnosaur novel?
It's so funny too, because that story is true. I guess Roger knew, the owner of this bookstore, and this guy would tell him about, books that would come in that might make good, possibly a good film, and Carnosaur was, I believe, wasn't it I think published in 1983 or something. It's John Brosnan, or under the name Harry Adam Knight. There we go, in 1984. It was, he, had this idea out, about a decade before Michael Crichton had published Jurassic Park. And Roger, I don't even know if there was any word that there was a production going on until after, Roger had already purchased the rights and then just set them aside. Because I believe that, he bought, I don't know what the option was, but, he must have been able to hold on to it, for quite a while, because obviously when Jurassic Park had been announced, obviously it set the wheels turning in Roger's head, and he put the movie into production pretty quickly. As what I remember, there was about 10 weeks of pre-production on the show. That came about really fast. I remember getting a phone call from John, and he said, "Come in tomorrow."
That sounds like a Roger Corman production.
Yeah.
Oh yes, indeed.
But what a stroke of genius! And not only that, getting the film in the theaters the month before Jurassic Park guaranteed the film, some financial success, as well as. And gosh, it even got a thumbs up from Gene Siskel. So,
yeah, I saw that on a clip on YouTube. Siskel and Ebert giving differing opinions on Carnosaur.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you ever saw the show, The Critic, the animated show that was on Fox, and they did a little Carnosaur bit on there with along with their version of the Carnosaur poster, which I got a big hoot out of, considering it's my sculpture on the poster. But yeah, it's like it was. It came about so fast. Before I knew it, I brought in a stack of books. John says, "Bring in every reference book you have," and so I brought in a dozen books, plus a sculpture I'd already been working on, just as a personal piece, as kind of a guide. And I walked in the next day and put the stuff down, and I looked, and John had already, him and another guy had already been building forms on a couple of body casts of Kane Hodder, And I looked at him, and I looked at my sculpture, and I went, well, this isn't going to work. So it's like, basically old world film dinosaurs, tail draggers, standing up straight and tall, the standing at attention dinosaurs. But it was a really fun experience.
Did you get any hands-on experience working with Roger himself?
He gave me some advice, mostly by phone. Really, I don't think he even came by the shop, but he. I remember talking to him on the phone where he described, I want him to have this, and and he wanted a Hollywood dinosaur, is essentially what he told me. He didn't want to go with the current trend, because there had already been like some Jurassic Park leaks, and everybody kind of knew where things were going at that point. But Roger wanted to go completely, 1950s, 1960s style dinosaurs. He wasn't interested in making them accurate or current, which was kind of a relief in some ways, because, it's kind of a unique T-Rex in some ways. He has more in common with the T-Rex from the Land Unknown than Guanji or anything that you'd see James Gurney do, or anyone of anybody else. So it was a true John Buechler dinosaur. He said, when it's sculpting the nostrils, I want to see the boogers.
Of course. I've also come to understand that director Adam Simon's first things was to largely reject John Brosnan's novel, and there were also several treatments and drafts for the film. Is there anything you could tell us perhaps about those earlier drafts of the Carnosaur script, and if any were perhaps closer in tone and likeliness to the book?
It's like at first I received one question that said, was it fun, interesting working with Roger? And absolutely, it always is. He's a really, I've met him once, a couple of times, but he's a really interesting man, and he has a lot of history. And as far as the scripts go, I know that that Adam had. I guess there must have been some script form. Maybe it was a treatment, and who knows? I'm not sure. It could have been closer to the source material from the novel, but Roger is a pretty socially conscious filmmaker. He always likes to add, some relevant material into his films. Despite their fantastic natures, I'm sure that he and Adam sat down and said, well, what can we do with this, to make it different? Also something that we can do within our budget. And I guess it made sense for them to take the whole, turn it more on its head and turning into kind of a more, the political battle that it was with dinosaurs. It's an interesting film. It's for what it is, it's got some really interesting ideas. But I never did see a script. I saw the shooting script, but I wasn't even aware how different they were until I bought a copy of the novel and read it, which ironically has more in common with the current Jurassic World, than Carnosaur. So they obviously lifted a lot of the novel Carnosaur for the current Jurassic World, without any sort of acknowledgement.
And this leads me to another question. Did the author of the novel, John Brosnan, ever visit the set of Carnosaur?
No, unfortunately, I never got to set because again, and I would have been happy to drop my rate for John if he would just asked me, but I mean, I did about 6, I think about 5 or 6 weeks. I was maybe on about half of the schedule, and then John just, he had a really good, healthy budget originally, and then it got knocked down to like under 100,000 or something, and so it just, with the loss of the revenue, he had to start making drastic cuts. So he let me go one week, and then the next week, the guy who had taken my place as shop supervisor got let go because, again, he was too expensive. And it became kind of a revolving door thing for a bit for a few of us. But I think Ken Hall may have actually supervised the shop also after that, because John, had him come in and to build that full scale one. He may have had Ken looking over stuff, but he also had John Deal there sculpting, and the late, I'm sorry, not John Deal, but Mike Jones sculpting on the show, and he had come up with the Deinonychus sculpture and basically all of that stuff. And some of the stuff was based on his knowledge. I mean, he was really well versed. And we also had the advantage of having Don Glute advising us also. So, and Don came by the shop a few times and looked stuff over and was helpful in giving us direction.
There's another Godzilla connection. Don was involved with the Hanna-Barbera cartoon.
Yes, he was. I was just watching those last night. I've got the entire series. I've got all the episodes, and so I was just last night. I was hanging out, and I was like, oh, what have I watched in a while? I was like, it's. I said, pull these out and watch them. Who can forget Godzuki?
Oh, of course.
Maybe he would have been the sidekick.
Oh well. Okay, here now I have a hypothetical question here. If, let's say, the first Carnosaur film had a larger budget and had more time to film, could more creatures from the novel have been incorporated into the film, like, say, the plesiosaur and the other dinosaur species that were not featured in the film?
I don't think so. I think Roger's main concern was the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and I think if the budget had remained where it was, I think it just would have been put into better production values and probably more time in shooting. But I don't know if he would have added any more dinosaurs. Maybe. I can't say for sure, but I think that Roger, he seemed to be more concerned. He said, I want to see a Tyrannosaurus Rex walking down Main Street. And that was pretty much what Adam had, what he told Adam. So, and I do remember, chatting with Adam. He'd come by. He was really, really, a really super nice guy. And I think he did a fantastic job with the film as it was.
One thing I wanted to know, well, it sounds like you didn't really spend any time on the set, but maybe you may have heard something over the years. One of probably the strangest thing people notice about Carnosaur is that it stars Diane Ladd. And I think that was obviously a play because, her daughter, Laura Dern, was in Jurassic Park. But does anyone know what her attitude about Carnosaur is?
I think she was into it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you.
She looks like she's having a good time.
Yeah, well, it's funny because obviously her and Bruce, her husband, Bruce Dern, had gone back with Corman many, many years working with him in the 60s. So they were old friends. I mean, I'll tell you, it's like the weirdest thing was, I mean, and it's something that I never really thought of, was one of the weirdest things I ever saw was when Charlie Band and William Shatner got together and they give each other a big bear hug. And it's like, I can imagine that's sort of the way it was between Roger and Diane, and and stuff. They were so familiar with each other and known and respected each other for so many years and worked together that she probably, was very happy to do the job, because it was an interesting character for her, and she was known for taking interesting roles. Mm-hmm. It was a good role. I mean, it's a really demented performance. And it's the whole idea, that I'm just going to replace humans, across the board. And then she eventually becomes one of her own guinea pigs. It's a very, very odd idea. And I thought she did really, really well with the role. She was a great choice.
What was it like dealing with the lead actor, Raphael Sbarge, who played the role of the alcoholic Doc?
God, I never met him. I hate to tell you, it's like, again, Jennifer Runyon, I'd love to have met her. I think I may have even worked with her on something at some point afterwards, but it would have been, for me, the big disappointment of not going to set, obviously not getting to play with all the dinosaurs and stuff like that, was they had a guy named Harrison Page who played the sheriff in the film. And Harrison and I had worked together years before on a Jean-Claude Van Damme film called Lionheart, where I did his prosthetic makeup for the show. And he was, it would have been nice working with him again. So I think I've said pretty much, I think that's about everything I could say on that.
All right, so you want to finish up your questions for the first film?
Yes. Was it fun or interesting working with Roger?
Absolutely. Roger's a really cool, interesting man. He's just got the wheels are definitely turning in that guy's head. He's really smart, and he knows what he's doing. It's such, he's a unique personality, and I've always, been very, highly respectful of his career. And getting the chance to work on some of his films were really very cool. And I got the chance only to work on the lot once on a film called The Unborn, which was just a great experience, having down at the Venice lot where so much history had taken place. And not only that, he met my fiance recently and signed. She had made her own Audrey 2 plant puppet, and he signed it for her. So yeah, so Maggie really, really loved that. So he was very cool to her. But it was, he's great.
Cool.
So as a kaiju maniac, I can't help but notice that the production design on Carnosaur was Aaron Osborne, who he worked on Ultraman the Ultimate Hero and went on to direct Zarkor, the Invader, and Kra the Sea Monster. What was that relationship like?
Oh, he must. I mean, he was the right guy for it. And I remember when the Ultraman show was being worked on, and I wanted to work on it so bad. It would have been so cool, as well as Zarkor and Kra. Ken, as a matter of fact, Ken Hall made the Kra costume, so more to talk to him about. But yeah, no, it's such an odd coincidence, working on where you go from film to film, and sometimes it just takes these twists kind of back into territory that's already familiar.
And closing here, how do you see Carnosaur nowadays from the outside in as a fan of the film versus when you were actually working on the film?
Gosh, I haven't watched it in years, but I have a lot of real great memories of it. And of course, we went and saw it when it came out, when it premiered. And I was, like I said, I was really impressed because it's a dark film, and it doesn't really hold back too much. It's a little silly at times, but I thought for the budget they shot it on, and it's kind of a, I mean, who would think a dinosaur film with a message, about the message about the poultry industry. So not only that, Clint Howard gets it. So he anything with Clint Howard's awesome. So.
And I had a question about the Carnosaur novel, if you had this answer, but if you don't, then. But do you actually know who has the current rights to the Carnosaur novel since John Brosnan's passing in 2005?
God, I have. I'll be honest. I don't know. I wouldn't. I mean, what if Roger still holds that? Because I have no idea, because Roger, may have been shrewd enough to say, I'll buy it in perpetuity, or but who knows? I mean, it'd be interesting to see if somebody eventually would make a different version of it. I kind of hope they don't, because I was like the originals over remakes, but who knows? Who knows what? I'll tell you. I mean, you were asking about possibly meeting John Brosnan at one time, but I never met him. But Michael Crichton had come through John Buechler's shop while we were there when we were going to do Congo originally at Empire, and Michael Crichton came through John Buechler's shop. So didn't get to meet John Brosnan, but I did get to meet Michael Crichton. So.
Oh, wow. And what was Michael Crichton like from the brief time that you did meet him?
Very quiet, really tall. None of us, it was most of us. It was just more, hello, and but that would have been interesting, though. It would have been nice to work on that show. Who knows how it would have been. If we had built the ape suits, but it was an exciting time. Would have been nice.
And I think my last question for the first Carnosaur, if Corman and Simon had agreed to include all the creatures from the novel, which I'll run down. You have 2 Deinonychus, you have Megalosaurus, Tarbosaurus, which in the book actually takes the place of the full-size T-Rex. Mm-hmm. You have the Plesiosaurus, you have the Echilosaurid, Scolosaurus, and a young Brachiosaurus, and a pair of baby Tyrannosaurs. Do you believe that you could have done practical effects for the Plesiosaur in the same style of the movies, or would you have had to go on with CGI?
I think it would have been. A full scale and a miniature. I think it would have. Because I don't think Roger would have gone with stop motion at that time, and which is ironic considering Roger's films have so many like visual effects in them now as opposed to before. Because Roger didn't really care for visual effects that much because you had to pay and wait, and nothing drove him crazier, I guess. But John took the Deinonychus puppet, or took castings out of the Deinonychus puppet a few years afterwards and turned it into a plesiosaur creature for the Tarzan show he was working on. So I guarantee, if had it been that way, there would have been like a hand puppet version and like kind of maybe a rod puppet version, or or a marionette version or something in the water, and probably been a full scale, maybe head or something, because that's just the way Roger rolled.
That would have been pretty cool to have seen the plesiosaur in the film. I also, on final note, I read in the Dinosaur Market that there was also a unused pterodactyl puppet. Is there any truth to that?
I think there is, actually. I believe there was one started, but it never. I don't believe it ever got finished. That would have probably been Mike Jones' sculpture. But I just, there's something about that rings familiar. But it's been so many years. But I think there might have been something that was being planned. Maybe I don't even know. Maybe it was just designed and there was never a sculpture made or something. But that does sound familiar.
And I think this would be a good place to conclude discussion of the first Carnosaur film to now step into the first sequel, Carnosaur 2.
Carnosaur 2.
May I take the first question on that, please?
Yes.
Is that all right?
Go for it.
I hope I can answer anything as far as. We'll have a good, rousing conversation about how enjoyable the movie was.
I don't know if you would know the answer to this or not, but if you don't, that's all right. Was Rick Dean really as funny in person as he was in Carnosaur 2 and 3?
Oh, you know something? I worked with Rick briefly on a show called Satanic, and he was a really funny guy, and I think I don't remember any particular things, but my friend Dirk von Besser, who had worked with me on the Godzilla stuff, was working for John also, and I think wasn't Rick in part 3 also?
Yeah, it's Polchak.
Yeah, because I think they might have been Dirk on 3, and then they did a film called Ghost Ship at the same time with the Velociraptor suit. But I remember him mentioning Rick quite often, and being like quite funny. But I remember briefly, that Rick was, he was a pretty funny guy on the set. I can't say any specific things, but it's but just general memories, because when you're working on so many of these things, and sometimes they go so fast, they come up kind of vague memories.
Yeah, I thought he was hilarious in both the second and the third film. In fact, he's one of my favorite characters in the second and third film.
It's really, considering, Carnosaur 2 is the aliens of Carnosaur. It's like it just lifted the plot of Aliens and just dropped it into the Carnosaur universe. And doesn't John Savage say something like "Someone save the kid" or something?
Yes,
it's like I gotta save the kid.
Yep, I remember. I can still remember that scene vividly.
And yet it's only the first Carnosaur that has a chest bursting scene. I was surprised by that.
Oh yeah. Oh, those are always fun to do. I didn't do any of those ones, but it's I remember just hearing they had Bill Zahn and other a few other guys there doing all the makeup effects stuff, and I thought, God, that would have been me. It would have been so much fun. But I think John was paying people like $50 a day at the time, so maybe I was lucky, because I'm sure I found some work eventually, which I'm sure paid more than $50 or $100 a day. So maybe in the long run it wasn't a bad thing. I did get my moment in the Movie Magic episode, so that I had that going for me. So
I mean, I guess if you had to choose one between Tokyo: The Last War and Carnosaur, which is your favorite monster coming out of a cesarean section?
Well, I think Carnosaur for sure. Then, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that takes the cake. So.
Yeah, definitely. It seems that Anthony Dublin did helped did the effects on both Carnosaur 2 and 3.
Oh yeah, yeah. Tony is a oh god. Tony goes back. You know, I hate to say it. You know, he's an old timer. Like he was around since the '60s, working at places like Cascade and working. I mean, on almost everything. I worked with Tony first on Lobster Man from Mars, where he was set up a replica of the of Old Faithful for me in the Lobster Man costume to get boiled alive. And he was just a funny guy, and he's really knowledgeable, and he's so talented. He does so many things, from physical effects to miniatures to photography to setups for stop motion, and he was really big over at Robot Chicken and shows like that. But Tony's one of those guys that I remember reading about in Starlog magazine and things like that when I was much younger, and we see each other rather infrequently. Maybe just a few months ago I saw him, and he's still doing it. He's still hanging in there.
Yeah, it's pretty cool here. And it seems that the dinosaurs seem to cooperate a lot better on Carnosaur 2 than on the first film. It seems that John Buechler had some choice words about his experiences working on the first film. Is there anything you'd like to elaborate with regarding how Buechler viewed his experiences working on the first Carnosaur and contrasted to Carnosaur 2?
Well, I think John was really disappointed on the first film with the budget getting slashed. I mean, I can't remember what his original budget was, just for the prep work and stuff, but it got slashed quite a bit. I mean, this was going to be like a big thing for him, and so I think it was quite crushing, and at the time for him. But he persevered, and he had a great crew behind him to get everything done, and John is very pragmatic that way. But I think by the time the second film rolled around, it's a much more action oriented film, and it had I think it was just more fun in a lot of ways. It wasn't just kind of like Dinosaur stalking, people chained to to tractors and stuff. This one, again, was set up more like Aliens. So I think by that time, and John was, I mean, at that point, everything was pretty much built. I think, if anything, they patched the skins up on the puppets, and maybe later they had to recast the stuff, but that's a lot easier than rebuilding them from scratch. So, of course, you're doing it for a reduced budget still, but at that point, when the work's already done, and you're not, you're just adding stuff or pulling molds off the shelf to recast gore pieces and stuff like that. You're saving a bit of money, so I'm sure he was probably happier. And I think, I guess John must have directed the second unit stuff, the miniature stuff on the first film, if I recall, but I'm sure he did it on the second and third films also, and he's much more into that, the directing thing, so that always makes him happier.
So yeah, you have anyone else have any more questions about Carnosaur 2 before we jump into the last of the official Carnosaur films with Carnosaur 3 Primal Species?
I guess just generally when puppets and things get reused from show to show, is there a credit that passes on? Is that as a standard protocol, or is it?
No, they don't. At that point, they don't really have to credit, because I don't think I received a credit on any of the follow-ups, as well as Dinosaur Island. I don't think I received any credit. I think Fred Olin Ray called me to build some foreground miniatures for it, which I didn't do. But at that point, no. It's like it's a thing called producer's discretion, and even on films where you're actively involved, you sometimes slip through the cracks, and you don't get credited. And, especially when you're just a crew member.
Okay, so with Carnosaur 3, that film has the premise of terrorists hijacking a truck thing, and it's got nuclear materials on there, which they find in their oopsie moment. There's man-eating dinosaurs on board that truck. So
that was the speed of Carnosaur films, I guess. It's like, yeah, it's like those darn pesky terrorists are gonna, they're gonna get us all eaten by dinosaurs one day.
Yeah, Mark Berry is quoted as describing Carnosaur 3 with this opening paragraph. He says, quote, "As much as Carnosaur 2 was an unexpected pleasure, Carnosaur 3 is a complete misfire. Lacking a single frame of plausibility, C3 brings the Carnosaur trilogy to an abrupt and forgettable conclusion." So this one really sounds like it was shot on, pardon my language here, shitty, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. Well, also, if you notice, those films have so much footage from the first film in them, too. It's like they're not even shooting a full film. I think the second one, had, more footage shot for it than the third one had. But each one of them, it's like a Puppet Master film, where if you don't throw in shots from the first film, you think maybe you're cheating the audiences or something, but Roger, loves to all day, and here I am, like, yeah, there was a faux pas, a Freudian. That wasn't a Freudian slip, but still, those guys, they're budget conscious, and anywhere they can save a buck, it's like it doesn't matter to them that you've seen that same shot of the T-Rex, in every film, but by God, it saved them a few $100. So, but I gotta watch those films again. I don't think I have any of them. I'm gonna have to pick up copies of them at some point and watch them again.
I have all three of them on DVD.
Wait, do you have Raptor also?
No, I hate that film.
Same here. That's like the All Monsters attack of low-budget dinosaur films.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, I noticed that you guys didn't like. You want to talk about the Carnosaur series, but Raptor is like somehow missing, even though it's. I don't think there's one. Isn't there like not one shred of original footage of a dinosaur in that film? That's like every shot is taken from the other films.
Yes. Yep. 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah. I think maybe they had the full scale suit for shots, but that was about it. But still.
Yeah.
Well, it's if there is, I think. If anybody's throwing a few dollars around saying, "Give me another dinosaur film," Roger's gonna oblige. Because I'm surprised we haven't seen one lately. I'm surprised he hasn't done one for every Jurassic Park film that's been released.
Well, there's a little studio called The Asylum that's putting out mockbusters every so often. So they've basically taken over the niche that Roger Corman once dominated so many years ago.
Well, Corman did like Dino Croc and things, right? So maybe he's
that's true. Yeah. Well, that's him sort of aping The Asylum now. It's like,
well, Jeff, you did some Asylum films too, right?
I just did one in May. I mean, I actually did a get this, and tell me what film you think that they were trying to copy. It was called Alien Predator.
Alien versus AVH, Alien versus Hunter, which is a ripoff of Alien versus Predator.
Yeah, well, I mean, I worked on Alien versus Hunter for the Asylum too. I like the creature.
So Jeff, you might be one of the only people that has worked on both an Alien, the like a franchise movie, and the Asylum version, because you worked. Did some stuff with Alien 3,
true,
right?
Yeah. That's right. I was over at ADI when they did the pickups, and so I was doing things like casting Rottweiler teeth and painting pads, dog foot pads and things like that. But that was a cool experience. But it's so funny too, because they wanted to hire me for a show like right after this Alien Predator show, and it was called Nazi Overlord. And I just and not only that, it was like there was only one really cool thing in the script that I would have liked to have done, but I managed to, something else came up and I did it, and then I was told that the way that they did it was terrible. So, oh yeah, it's definitely a reference to that film. It's you can't. I think the only original idea they had was Sharknado. So. But those guys, they're great guys. I like them a lot. But man, it's it's like those films are like shooting or like being in a war. It's because they're so fast. No dinosaur films for them.
Okay, right before we wrap up the Carnosaur retrospective, all right, Kevin, you had some questions about potential Carnosaur sequels.
I did.
Well, you were asking.
maybe you're thinking of me, Greg. I think I did. I was curious to ask Jeff.
I did too, actually.
Well, we kind of all did.
Yeah. So I mean, was there ever a Carnosaur 4 talked about instead of these weird offshoots that just use the footage? Do you know?
Something I wouldn't doubt that it had been. I can't tell you like for sure, but again, I wouldn't put like really anything past them, because once they've spent money on these props and infrastructure. I mean, I was, to me, it was always like, you just make new stuff for every film, and they do it with Jason Voorhees. There's a new Jason in every film. It's like, and it turns out it's almost the opposite. It's like you still got that prop. You still, especially at that end, where again, these guys are, these guys are as wealthy as God, and yet, they don't want to spend a dime on, the stuff, which isn't, I don't fault them for it, because what they do spend is as adequate. But if there was a Carnosaur 4, I wouldn't doubt that that Roger might not, or might have the idea to do it eventually himself. So, maybe we should start a petition. So, start a petition, new Carnosaur 4, but all new footage.
And better yet, a true adaptation of the original novel with all the creatures present in there.
Yeah, that's true. Well, again, they did it with Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. I mean, it really is, the basic idea. Dinosaurs. The billionaire, the mansion, the dinosaurs, and the compound, basically, and it's essentially that idea, and I don't think Universal paid a dime for that. I wouldn't doubt it if they just lifted it and said, sue us. But it would be nice to see a version of the film shot as written, especially with those juvenile T-Rexes. That was a really cool sequence in the novel.
Yeah, that is how the character of Jane Penward is killed in the novel. She was the basis for Diane Ladd's character, but in the novel, she is a very attractive nymphomaniac character that sleeps with the novel's protagonist, journalist David Pascal, and he has to boink her, to gain access to her husband, Lord Darren's private zoo where all the dinosaurs are being housed.
What a way to see dinosaurs.
I mean, the book opens up literally with a farmer's husband getting mauled by one of the Deinonychus, and then from the first 10 pages, we have multiple characters getting offed by the Deinonychus and a teenage couple getting it on the back of a car. They also end up getting killed and eaten in typical B-movie fashion.
Yeah. I've still got a copy of the book. Again, it'll be one of those things like I'll have to sit down and read again when I find the time.
Yeah, there's another interesting sequence that I just thought about from the book concerns the Tarbosaurus. Mm-hmm. After it breaks free from the zoo, there's a little sequence where it's chasing a vehicle in a manner not too dissimilar from the Jurassic Park film, surprisingly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ironic, dinosaurs, they tend to do the same thing. It's like, they'll chase cars, they'll tear down banners that say when dinosaurs ruled the earth, they'll do it all.
Another interesting connection between Carnosaur and Jurassic Park is the fact they both feature Dilophosaurus, though in the case of both novels, the Dilophosaurus is actually a full-sized 20-foot individual, unlike the little pipsqueak that was in the Jurassic Park movies.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's that is like now the most iconic design from that, and it's it's so obviously inaccurate, and it's such guesswork, but somehow it stuck with with the zeitgeist. I mean, it's like my fiance were watching Family Guy the other night, and they pulled the Dilophosaurus gag, and it's like I like them, I like them without the frills.
It's quite funny that the dinosaurs in the Carnosaur novel are actually described more bird-like than reptilian in the novel, the way they act and the way they behave. And from what little research I've gathered on the matter, it seems the dinosaurs in this book were actually somewhat accurate for the knowledge of dinosaurs that was in the 1980s. Now, I'm presuming that John Brosnan had access to the same book that Crichton did, which was Greg Paul's Predatory Dinosaurs of the World.
I'm sure, yeah. Yeah, it seemed like there was a big shift, at that time, Robert Backer's books the world just getting a little bit bigger at that point in terms of dinosaur knowledge, and it was great. It was such a great time because all of a sudden there started being like a lot of books being published, and a lot more information started becoming more common, and so that was a great thing about all of this. These dinosaur films that were released in the 90s, and it's sort of perpetuated. You didn't get much of that with, say, like a Ray Harryhausen film, nor would I have wanted it at that point, because I love Ray's dinosaurs. There's something so unique about them, and Jim Danforth's work and When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, and the dinosaurs of today now are really more animal-like, whereas you didn't have that sheer sort of feeling of terror that you from a Jurassic Park film, to say like Valley of Gwangi, where the dinosaurs were they were antagonists, but you just never felt that same sort of fear. It was more wonder. I'd like to see another film like that, though. I'd love to see another Ray Harryhausen style dinosaur film. I don't think it's wrong to have those films.
And I actually could think of a story that could be adapted that would deliver on all those goods, and that would be a potential film adaptation of Gary Girardi's Dinosaurs Attack.
Oh yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Yeah, those are really the. So I love the cards, and the artwork is just so great. I mean, obviously Mars Attacks inspired, but such a great concept.
Yeah, a lot of the dinosaurs on those cards were very clearly supposed to be licensed characters like Gorgo or Reptilicus and other licensed characters, including that group shot where you have Godzilla, Gertie,
Yeah.
and so many other iconic dinosaur characters of old.
Yeah, it would have been great if you could just bring back dinosaurs. It turns out, hey, they did look like Guanji or the Allosaurus from 1 million years BC. It's like he was right, but it's like that really would make a great project. Hopefully that'll get off the ground at some point.
From my research I've conducted, it seems that there was an attempted Dinosaurs Attack adaptation made in the early 90s, but Jurassic Park shot that down before it could happen.
That's true, yeah. You recall reading about that myself.
They should have released it a month earlier.
Exactly, yeah. They should have released it a month earlier than Carnosaur.
So... Okay, here. Let's talk about some of the other dinosaur film projects that you've been attached to, Jeff. You had mentioned to me in a conversation that you were briefly attached to that little direct-to-video film called Theodore Rex. You want to give us a little bit more about how you got sort of scammed into working on that movie?
Well, it's ironic because that was the first thing I came back to work on when I got back from Romania on the Primevals, which was another, sort of dinosaurian sort of project. But they, John Criswell, his shop, had, been attached to the film and obviously the problems with it were already pretty well publicized. This whole deal with Whoopi Goldberg, doing a handshake deal and then finding herself stuck with it. And from what I understand, she was just really unpleasant on set. But I came back from Romania and was looking for work as Charlie still owed me money. And I think they called me. I think they called me. Maybe Criswell called me or Greg Johnson or somebody and said they were starting on this thing and they were going to actually have to move a lot of it into a new shop, which was just a couple of blocks from his other place, and why I'd be interested in coming in and sculpting some dinosaurs for it. So absolutely, I said yes, and I was there briefly. I think the work looked great, but there was just something about it. The situation just wasn't right. It was a lot. It was really stressful over there. I think, I think John was under a considerable amount of pressure from production, and so it just wasn't that pleasant. And so I basically, wanted to get out of there. I was sort of like, one day finally they said we've got to cut a bunch of people, and I was amongst the people that were cut, and I was pretty grateful for it because, like I said, the work looked fine, but just something about the project didn't seem right to me, and it seems to have followed through. It's one of those forgettable, films.
Yeah.
What sort of different constraints do you have to take into account when you're working on like a dinosaur that has to perform one set of movements on say one type of film versus, say Carnosaur is not as brightly lit as something like Theodore Rex, which has a very different tone that it's going for, and I'm assuming that the puppeteers and whatnot have sort of different performances.
They because Theodore Rex was so obviously a Henson style production. They wanted a very cartoony look for everything, and I did. I mean, the first sculpture that I did was a Bill Stout designed Apatosaur, and it had been started by somebody else, and then I was brought in to get it back into shape and finish it. And Bill wasn't involved in the film at that time; he'd already been dropped out or something. But he did come by and take a look at it and was suitably impressed, which was very nice. But I remember the second thing I sculpted turned out okay, but I wasn't getting much direction. And the fact is also these were a lot of men in suit with animatronic heads. So there has to be the consideration, for tailoring the suits to fit people. Sometimes you may even have a change in a performer, so they have to be somewhat modular and easy to fit, different people if need be, and as opposed to a puppet, which is essentially pretty straightforward, pretty linear. But again, a lot of it I think was just aesthetic in terms of design, because the Carnosaur creatures, though not realistic, were styled in one way as opposed to the Theodore Rex, which were very cartoony and like I said, very Henson-y.
Mm-hmm.
So they were cute. I think they were well done suits, but again, I think there were some problems which showed up eventually in the production. But it's not the fault of the effects crew. It's just production was really rough shoot from what I understand.
I guess to back up, I don't know if due to recent events you're sick of talking about the primevals, but given no. Okay, with a revival coming up, I was just sort of wondering what your thoughts are on the something from so long ago.
I'm actually excited about it. I first was aware of primevals, of course, because of Famous Monsters and publishing Raiders of the Stone Ring information. And when I met Dave Allen for the first time, that was when Charlie Band had first gotten involved. Well, it wasn't when he first got involved in it, but because obviously there was talk about it when Dave did Laser Blast a few years before, but is when they were actually going into production on it. And yeah, this was prior to Empire. This was still, I think, a Charles Band production at the time, and they had already actually had the arena set built in Dave's stage at his studio over in Burbank. But I got to see a lot of that stuff, and so when I got hired to go to Romania, it was like a dream come true for me, because it was one of those films that I wanted to work on from when I was very young, and getting the opportunity to go over and do it was, it was an enormous honor. Although I will say it was an extremely rough shoot. Because due to the situation of the country at the time. I mean, they were only, I think, 6 years out of communism at that point, and dictatorship. So it was a really long shoot, 9 weeks in Romania. So it was, but about 9 months ago, Chris Endicott contacted me and told me that Charlie is doing well. Fullman's doing well right now. So he decided it's time to actually put money into Primevals and get it out, so that it's finally out there. And it probably won't be in a. I don't know how completed a form it's going to be, because from what I understand, there's going to be a truncated version released through the streaming service, probably next year. So, and then that will lead up to the DVD Blu-ray release, which will be like probably a double DVD set with 2 versions of the film. One will be a little more complete, which is I think is probably going to have some slugs missing from it, or there's going to be some. They're going to figure out some way to, to fill in those spots, because I believe that the flood scene may be cut out completely. So, and there's going to be a documentary also, of course. But Chris talked to me, like I said, about 9 months ago about possibly rebuilding a hominid suit for it. So I'm just kind of waiting to hear what the plans are, and but I'm just as excited as everybody else, because it was one of those films that really, I spent a lot of time being involved in, and I kind of, having known Dave for so many years and getting a chance to be involved in it, I'm very, very protective of it, and I'd love for everyone to be able to see it. I think we all deserve that.
Okay, I just posted a question here in the chat from John LeMay asking if you were part of the current event to finish doing the Primevals.
Yeah, I just mentioned that Chris and I had talked about it, and it looks like I will be involved in it. I'm just, like I said, I'm just sort of waiting for some confirmation. I should contact Chris and find out, but I think it's even still a little too early for that, because it's just it's just getting publicized, and then there's going to be a Kickstarter campaign, I believe, and but I am still actively in contact with Chris about what the next stages will be.
Cool. Since we were talking about a previously unmade film now getting a chance to be made, I want to turn the discussion over to lost dinosaur films. Of the myriad dinosaur films that have never seen the light of day due to not being made, which ones would you like to see be adapted nowadays?
Oh boy, it's a good question. How about all of them? It's like, God, I'd love to see Creation. Could any of the Willis O'Brien projects?
There's
even
lots
the ones
of those.
even the ones that were sort of not fully dino related. Last
War Eagles.
Or War Eagles, any of those, heck, there's so many. My mind goes blank on just titles and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm time. Yeah, there you go. Time Gate is definitely would be a wonderful opportunity, and I only found out after it had shut down that the shop that they set up for Time Gate was, I mean, I could have walked there from my house, and if I known it was there, I would have been down there every day, probably sweeping the floors or something.
So, is there anything more you'd like to perhaps tell us about Danforth Timegate for those listening that might not have heard of this project?
Well, I mean, it's basically concerned basically a time safari. You could go back at any point in time and hunt the animal of your choice, and a group. From what I understand, I mean, I don't have all the details of the story, but a group goes back in prehistoric times and ends up, I believe, getting trapped there, or they become separated from their portal device, and so it's a familiar sort of story, but it just would have had the most amazing effect scenes in it. I mean, just given Jim's work in When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth and everything else he's done, it just would have been a fantastic visual project. And when the fact that Jim was going to direct it, it would have been a great opportunity to see how he could have handled a project like that. Would have been nice too he would have been able to finally use that theropod armature that he had made for When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth that never was used. The Pooftosaurus that Aida Young said some not too flattering things about. That was something I got to play with. The first time I met Jim, he brought that armature out and let me mess around with it, as well as the Mighty Joe Young armature that he had in his possession at the time. But yeah, I mean, Timegate would have had some really great set pieces.
And it would have also been one of the very few films to have featured a prehistoric crocodilian species in Dinosuchus. I've seen some behind-the-scenes photos and image work mentioning that they were constructing props for the prehistoric, Dinosuchus crocodilians for this film. For me, that would have been pretty interesting to see some super crocs being animated via the stop-motion process, along with some primitive animatronics.
Yeah, I think there was a photo of Jim's sculpture posted recently too, if I'm not mistaken. Of the puppet version of it. But I've seen that footage I think isn't there like video or like Super 8 footage, I believe, also of them working on that at the shop, and I think there's some commentary on it talking about they had to kind of figure out how they did there it is how they went about doing it. As a matter of fact, it was that video that helped me immensely on a job that I had done where I had to build something waterproof and had to have a lot of like plywood and stuff in it, and that was their admission that we had a lot of polyester resin, to waterproof the wood was the key to the job. So I can thank them very much for being so forward thinking of shooting that footage.
Yeah, so and for anyone who was wondering what the whole Poofosaurus thing was, originally in When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, the mother dinosaur was supposed to have been a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but the T-Rex was quickly shot down by the film's producer, who was a rather raging homophobe even by 1960s, 1970s standards. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in my assessment of that, Jeff.
I think you're correct. I mean, her name was Aida Young. She was also, I believe, on 1 Million Years BC, and she was, bumped up the ladder for When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, and she produced a number of other films for Hammer, I believe. But yeah, no, you're right. It's she said it looks too much like a poofter or something like that. Kind of standing up on his high heels and with his little poofter arms or whatever. And apparently Jim, was just taken aback by that. Apparently he got her back though. In a way, there's a story that she walked in on him while he was deep in concentration on a scene, and she quickly exited the room like white as a sheet because the verbal assault that Jim had given her. And she said, I will never do that again. It's like,
oh,
yeah,
wow,
yeah. So, yeah, Jim's, Jim is Jim. It's, and I know how it is when you're in the middle of something and, and the last thing you want is someone coming in and interrupting you. I mean, I think Ray probably took it a little bit better on, start chasing the Argonauts. The phone would ring in the middle of the Hydra, and he wouldn't come back and wouldn't know if the head was moving forward or backward. But no, Jim was, pretty high strung. So.
Yeah, from what I've read of Volume 2 of Danforth's biography, it seemed he had a lot of misgivings regarding the studios throughout much of his career. From your interactions with Jim, did that seem to be true in a sense?
Oh yeah, no, Jim is very independent. Excuse me. Jim is really very independent, but he was pragmatic too. I mean, he knew that where the money's coming from. If they're offering it to you, you're going to take it. You're just going to have to deal with them along the way. But but that was born from experiences, like when dinosaurs ruled the earth, which was a pretty early, supervisory job for Jim. I mean, I don't know if he had really done anything that big up to that point himself. And as well as, I mean, the fact that he had such a short pre-production schedule. I mean, he had like less than half the time that, Ray had 6 months or 8 months or even more than that to prepare 1 million years BC, and they gave Jim like 3 weeks or something like that once he got to England, to get everything set up and before they went off the Canary Islands, and I think Ray told Jim like, they don't give you much time these days, but I'll tell you, boy, the work, it's just amazing. And apparently he went way over budget on the show because they never told him what the budget was. They just said basically, here you go. And they never, said, here's your cutoff point. So he just kept adding shots. He didn't add the shots himself. The shots were born out of the production decisions. Suddenly a shot that could have been done on location is shot in a stage and then needs 5 or 6 matte paintings to flesh it out. Those certainly weren't Jim's doing, but apparently they grew weary of him, going to the front office, and saying, oh, we need more money for this, we need more money for that. I think that's probably why the decision was made, for the third film, Creatures of the World Forgot, to have no dinosaurs. So, but that's Jim for you. Jim's not going to half-ass it. He's going to give it everything he's got.
And indeed, another very famous lost film project that Jim Danforth was attached to was Universal's first attempted King Kong remake. At the same time that Paramount was trying to do theirs. This was titled The Legend of King Kong. Want to give us a little bit about that film before we start getting into other films that you've worked on, like say the 1988 Blob and other films?
Yeah, I was acquainted with Jim about that time, and we never talked about that show in particular, but I'm sure that because I know about as much as you guys know, but I know that that it was it was pretty sad. It was pretty sad when when they pulled the plug on it, because I mean they'd already been, casting the film, and they had, already gone through quite a bit of money getting this thing going, and the fact that the Paramount film edged it out, was a huge crushing blow for Jim. So I'm sure he doesn't, I'm not sure like what he would say about it these days. We also certainly know his position on that version, the De Laurentiis version. So yeah, so moving on to the next stuff.
Okay, Kyle, you have the most amount of questions here, so I'll let you take the wheel here for a little while.
Well, yeah. So obviously the filmography is extensive, but one thing I wanted to ask, you did some work on Serpent and the Rainbow and Shocker, and sadly we lost Wes Craven way too soon. Did you get to interact with Wes at all, and do you have anything to say about him?
Well, unfortunately, again, he's one of those people that I've worked with on multiple films that I've never met, like Jack Nicholson and Kurt Russell, but I was hired onto that by the show's makeup effects supervisor, Lance Anderson, who had previously worked with Wes Craven on Deadly Friend, and it came. As a matter of fact, I went to interview with Kenny Myers on Return of the Living Dead 2 and was turned down. They needed crew, but he turned me down. And I recall Lance telling me if I had any new things in my book that I should give him a call. So I drove about 2 blocks away from his shop and called him from a payphone, and he said, "Sure, come on over," and looked my stuff over and said, "If you hear from me tonight, I'll let you know what's going on." He says, if I don't call you, come in tomorrow at 8 a.m. And so I was waiting for a phone call, and he never called. So I went up to his place at 8 the next morning and found out he was working on Serpent and the Rainbow, Wes Craven film, and I ended up being one of the few key crew members on the film. There was a few other guys that came in during the show, like Matthew Mungle and Mark Garbarino and Mike McCracken Jr. And but I was one of the guys that were from the beginning of pre-production through the end of pre-production. So
it's a super underrated movie, by the way. It's a great.
Yeah, it was really cool working on it. Just again, it was such a lucky thing. Again, getting turned down for one show and then getting hired onto another show, which ended up being a better show to work on. And there was so many cool things. There was a lot of stuff that we built that never ended up in the show. And then there were things that were built that were used differently, like that head of Paul Winfield, which I believe is going to be used for a different scene, and then ended up, used for the decapitation. But I'll never forget casting the snake for the film, the one that shoots out the little old crone, the mummy's mouth. And that was an actual Gaboon Viper, native of Haiti and that area, and they basically brought one in. The handler brought one in, and we made a mold of it. We cast it, made a big alginate mold of the snake. It was a really interesting situation.
Did that gig have anything to do with you getting a job on Shocker?
Oh yeah, because after that show, Lance, he kept me on. We were working on Moonwalker, the Michael Jackson thing, at the same time, and then and then the job would end, and then you'd go somewhere and work, and then the phone would ring. I remember coming back from Italy, from Arena, going to work on The Blob. And then about a month and a half into The Blob, I got a call from Lance to work on License to Kill, the James Bond film So I left the Blob to go back to Lance's and work on that. And so, but Lance, kept me on through like Pet Sematary and Demon Wind and stuff like that. I mean, Pet Sematary might have been the last thing I worked on over at Lance's, and I wasn't there the entire show. But again, he's such a great guy, and his son is Dave is taken over the shop, and he's an Oscar winner now, but I remember us all together, working for his dad, back in the late 80s.
Well, that's a great segue into what I think. I mean, there's so many classic movies that you've had some kind of hand in, but I think one of the most beloved is probably the Blob remake. Is there anything that in particular you can tell us about that job? I mean, those are some pretty elaborate things that go on in that film. I can say it was a big mess a lot of ways, in more ways than one. Making a 35-gallon drum of slime is messy, and then I believe it, yeah.
Dealing, I mean, Chuck Russell was under a lot of stress during that show, and I wish I'd get to meet him in any other situation, because I'm sure he's a really cool guy, but he was under a lot of stress, and he seemed very angry a lot, and he was getting his days. I mean, that's really what mattered, and he wasn't unpleasant, but I just remember it being a really stressful show to work on. But I mean, was only there for about a month and a half, but I just remember going in, working at the Blob shop for a few hours, and then I'd drive up to Valencia to work a few hours in the first unit, and then I'd drive way out into Simi Valley, doing a huge amount of mileage every day, and then working at Dream Quest in the miniatures units, and some really long days. But I mean, for me, the reason why I wanted to work on it was because Jack H. Harris, was executive producer on it, and I'd corresponded with Jack when I was a teenager due to Equinox, and I'd found his phone number in the phone book and called his office and got a hold of him, and turned to be a really cool guy, and we corresponded for quite a while, and I saw him on set once, and I just never got to say anything to him. But I met him didn't meet him in person a few years later. But he that was the big thing, working on a Jack Harris film. That was great experience for that.
Okay. I would like to ask, what was it like working on Deep Freeze, that movie about that killer trilobite?
That was awesome. That was a lot of fun. John had basically hired Chris Bergschneider and myself to run the show for him. And again, Mike Jones was on sculpting the creature, and we had Sue Laprelle and Russ Herpick also on the crew. It was a pretty small crew building this stuff for the show, but it was cool because John was directing the film, and it seemed a little overwhelmed at times, but he had just gone through some surgery prior to that, and he got through it, but it was so much fun doing that, because obviously we're doing sort of an Alien, style rip-off film. And what I do recall is was it Regent Entertainment or like basically saying it's like, we don't want any blood. It's all got to be blue. It's all got to get a blue trilobite juice or whatever. And I slipped blood in whenever I could. I just said, this is just not right. We got to throw some blood in here somewhere. But we had it was a really cool cast. Working with those guys. I'd love to see a sequel to that one at some point.
I noticed that I noticed in certain parts of the film there was actually stock footage from The Thing in certain parts of that.
Yeah, every exterior shot is from The Thing. Yeah, that was. I remember John telling me that. It's
What?
like during the show. Well, because obviously it's a low budget show, and they had to. But yeah, every Dave Dakota had the show before John, and Dave was going to hire me onto it anyways. But he told me that he was going to. His whole thing is he was going to make it like kind of like maybe a 1950s or 60s like Italian style, type film with the suits. They were going to wear these like silver suits with like helmets and stuff like that, but John got it and he rewrote the script and I'll tell you, it's like I loved working with Gotts Otto though. He was one of his main villain henchmen in one of the James Bond films, and he was such a fun guy. It's like really, really cool. The biggest star in Germany at the time.
I loved how crazy he was in that film. And in my opinion, he did one of the performances of a crazy guy I've ever seen in film.
Yeah, he doesn't start at 10, but he ramps it up there pretty fast and then goes beyond it. And he was in that Christopher Lambert Beowulf film that was shot over Romania, and I remember him seeing my Castell Films shirt and going, I love Castell Films, broke the ice there. We became pretty good friends at that point.
The James Bond film he was in, that was Tomorrow Never Dies, if I remember.
Tomorrow Never Dies. No, I did not work on that Beowulf film. That was a Todd Masters shop did that. So.
Oh.
Yeah, too bad. I know it's there will be things that pop up that like films that pop up that I did work on. There was a guy named William Wilson who is always amazed by the stuff I worked on, and he says he was watching a film late one night and said he says, I wonder if Jeff Farley worked on this, and the credits come up and there's my name. And it was like, yeah, that was that trilobite suit was pretty interesting because I can't remember the guy's name who wore the suit, but he was so inspiring because he was born with a congenital defect basically, where he didn't have any legs. And as a child actor, he was one of the E.T. performers. But he had the best and most positive attitude of anybody I've ever met. And he was so gung ho. We'd put him on put him in the trilobite suit. We'd lay him on the skateboard device thing that we built, and he just race around the hallways in this thing. And it was just like the guy was like greased lightning in that suit.
How did you do the giant queen trilobite near the end of the film?
Obviously, it was a hand puppet. There was a full scale tentacle made. But it was all hand puppet, which actually was a little funny story where Chris and I, there was kind of debate who was going to have their hand up inside this thing, puppeteering it. And so Russ Herpick, being the young guy, said, I want to do it. I want to be the puppeteer and this and that. And so we're fine with that. So you can stick your hand up in this thing and stick it through the miniature tank and underneath it. And Chris picked up a couple of like camper chairs, the type that have camping chairs that have, like cup holders and stuff in them and stuff. So Chris and I are off to either side of this puppet, sitting in these chairs with these cable controllers, pulling these things, got our drinks with us. We're like, snacks, this and that. And John every time, every take, would walk up to Russ with a cup of water, and he'd dump it over the puppet and onto Russ, and then yell action. So by the time they finished, Russ was drenched. And Chris and I are just sitting off to the side, smiling, pulling our cables. Just, it's like, you wanted the job.
Wow, that was a very entertaining story there. I actually just thought of a quick question about Pet Sematary. I was wondering, what was it like working on a Stephen King adaptation, and if you ever bet Stephen King while you're working on Pet Sematary?
No, actually, he never came into the show. He never came into the shop, and I do remember we had a different cast for Gage when he comes back as a zombie. Before they had cast Miko Hughes, and there's a guy named Michu who was the smallest man in the world or something. He was in Waxwork, and I remember we did his cast, and by the time we finished his cast and got him out of it, production had let him go, and he found out about this and went on the biggest tirade in the shop. It was an interesting situation, but everybody we met, like Denise Crosby, and again, I didn't go on set for it, and I'd worked years before. I worked on an adaptation of a Stephen King story called Grandma for the Twilight Zone, and it was really cool. It was nice being a part of a project that really was visible and everybody seemed to really like a lot. So it was a really great experience.
Before I pass it off to Kevin and Kyle, just a fun little question. What's your favorite Stephen King film adaptation and novel?
Oh, boy. I kind of liked the Mangler in some ways. Yeah.
That's not an answer I would have expected.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of liked it just because it was so crazy. Actually, I was offered a job on it, but I didn't get to work on it. But I thought it was such a strange film. And Ted Levine, is the lead in it, and after his tour de force is Buffalo Bill. And I like I said, I liked that episode of The Twilight Zone that I'd worked on, Grandma, which is based on one of his short stories. I think story-wise, I think The Mist probably.
Ooh, I
love The Mist. I think the story is so much better than the film, just because the ending is so ambiguous, and you just don't know what happens afterwards, and just the imagery really sticks with you. Ironically, I've never met Stephen King, but he happens to be a big fan of a band that Maggie and her dad introduced me to a few years ago. We're friends with, called Dawn of the Buffalo. And they're like one of Stephen King's favorite bands.
Actually, I was gonna ask, have you seen the trailer for the new Pet Sematary?
I saw it was out, but I avoided. I haven't watched it yet. Have you watched it? Actually?
Yeah, it looks really cool. It looks like they're really taking elements from the story that weren't in the last movie, just to kind of keep it different, like the Wendigo stuff and the stuff in the woods. So yeah, it'll be. It seems like it'll be its own version, not just a knockoff of the other one. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, it's like I should watch that and. Wait a second. Who was it that took over the Judd Crandall part for the new version? It's I can't remember who it was, but I think it was a good casting choice. Because of was it Fred Gwynn in the original? But I just can't recall who it is now.
It was John Lithgow.
John Lithgow. There you go. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, no, he's a definitely good replacement for Fred Gwynn.
Yeah, he's a great actor.
Yeah, he really is. Yeah, he'll definitely make it worthwhile. But all right.
All right. Well, I was gonna transition to Freddy's Dead, and just ask, first of all, as a makeup guy, did you get a chance to do any of the actual Freddy makeup, and just overall, what was your experience like working on a Freddy film?
Oh, it was really cool. I had just finished running a show for John called To Die For 2, or Son of Darkness To Die For 2, and we nice, but we John had just started Freddy's Dead while I was up in Big Bear or Lake Arrowhead shooting To Die For 2, and came back, and John put me on a puppet head for Freddy, basically for the 3D scene where he gets smacked in the cheek by his daughter. She picks up a pipe and hits him in the cheek, and there was going to be a shot where he comes up behind her and his cheek, like he grabs her, and then his cheek splits open and these tentacles like pop out. And so I was, even though I'm not a mechanics guy, I was put in charge of building this hand puppet of Freddy. So that was about as close as I got to actually doing the makeup, because it was all the appliances that we had put on a fiberglass skull, and I had to do all the mechanical stuff to go with it. And we shot the scene. It never made it to the final cut, and I don't know whatever happened to it. But I did quite a bit of work on set, like the scene with Yaphet Kotto, and there's a scene where I think that's where Freddy chops his fingers off, all the first film. We're sort of recreating the scene from the first one. He chops his fingers off. So me and Chris Robbins were rigging that stuff and then pumping the liquid through the tubes, and then we did the gags basically up in the Lake Hollywood area with I think it was maybe Breckenmeyer's character. I don't remember whose character was who falls and he's impaled by the invisible spikes. We did that gag, and that was the day that Roseanne Barr and Tom Arnold were on set, and I remember it being a really cool show to be involved with, and we did do some interaction with Robert, and I remember him on set talking about him and John like having some conversations and not wanting touch-ups in between shots. It's like Chris would walk up to maybe repair his lip or something. So no more glue, no makeup, no nothing. And then he'd like tell John, it's like, John, can you get this guy like anything? Chris wore the same shirt every day on set. Finally, Robert, like, I'm so frustrated. He's like, can you get him like a troll shirt or something? It's like, Johnny Depp came by and hung out with us for a little while when we were shooting some of the boiler room stuff and things like that. So, it was again that was a really, really fun show to be involved in, and having missed out on the Jason Voorhees experience with John, getting on at least a Nightmare film was definitely a nice experience.
All right. So I've got to say, every time you mention going to Italy to work on Arena, I do a little happy dance because I love that movie. And I was sort of wondering which segments, which pieces did you work on in that specifically?
Well, we had just finished in Ghost Town. That show had just wrapped up, or I think we were starting Arena maybe as Ghost Town was just winding down because they were shooting it in Arizona. and I seem to remember us, just starting early prep work on Arena. This was around, I think, September of '87. And at that point, they hadn't even, I think there was like already, some people were already destined to go to Italy on that. And they had pretty much, at a short time after, they had pretty much picked the entire crew to go over there. And I was not amongst them. And so, so it looked like that wasn't going to happen, but they had made a couple of choices, and then those choices got nixed for one reason or another. But John pulled me in his office one day and said, I get two choices for you. He says, either you can stay here and design Jason Voorhees, or you can go to Italy on Arena. And I was kind of like torn between which one do I want to do, but because my prime motivation for going to work for Empire had been to go to Italy, I decided to do that. And it was just probably one of the best experiences, and choices that I had made. That was my first time out of the country, for one thing. Excuse me. And we just had the greatest guys in the world, John Criswell and Mike Deek and Scott Coulter and, Roger McCoy and John Frazeran were over with us from MMI, and then Steve Wang and, Screaming Mad George from his crew, were over there. And so it was such a cool experience staying at, the hotel right at the beach, going into Rome every weekend, seeing Dario Argento's opera was being released into theaters at that point. So we saw that first run. We go see movies in Rome, like Name of the Rose or, things like that. And obviously we'd go, we just hung out as friends do over there, and just had the greatest experience. And my main thing was I was in charge of the mold department. So that was a pretty mundane job, but I had a bunch of, people working with me on that. And then John gave me the job of sculpting the makeup for the skull on Bill Butler. So I ended up sculpting and molding all of those pieces. And then Scott Coulter applied that when we were in Italy. And while we were in Italy, my main duty was doing the Weasel makeup on Armin Shimmerman, which started out as one design. The first design that I sculpted the original design that John had done, which was just a very rat-looking sort of thing. It would have been like a mechanical head, and that was nixed. And a prosthetic design was desired. So they came up with a new look, and Patrick Simmons sculpted that. But it was my job to apply the makeup on Armin, and we became really good friends during that. And I got the pleasure of hearing that Mac Allberg had said it was the first makeup that he had ever shot that he didn't have to light around to hide edges. So I was thrilled by that, because that word came from both Armin and the film's producer, Erwin Yablans, who had also produced Halloween. And as well as I played a lot of roles in the film. Every one of us from our crew played multiple aliens in the film. And so I was the doorman at the casino, the one that rubs his hands together and with a bit of a stoop and stuff, kind of hunched shoulders and stuff, which was based on a character. It was based on our maitre d' at the hotel restaurant. So I found that character pretty easily. And then I was in a lizard mask that John Criswell had sculpted, but it was an early job of Mike Elizalde's. That was Mike Elizalde's first job, from Spectral Motion. And I also ended up stunt doubling Armin in the Weasel makeup for the scene up in the limiter or whatever that was, the big explosions going on around Weasel, and then him and getting thrown over the railing. But that was pretty much me, because Armin had found out that his character on Beauty and the Beast had become reoccurring, and they needed him, so he had to leave the production early, and they needed somebody to double for him, and they asked if I had would help them cast a stunt guy for it. And then their production manager, Walter Massey, saw me and Armin standing next to each other and just said, Jeff, you play Weasel. We were like the same height and the same build. So I ended up doing that and getting quite nicely paid, a nice bump for that. So
yeah, it's gorgeous makeup, and I'll definitely have to look extra close the next time I watch it for you.
Well, if you watch that scene, especially that scene closely, from the point where everything Shorty has already left that scene, like they're up in the above, what was that thing called, the Sony 5000 or whatever, but he runs off and explosions start going off around Weasel, and he yells Nubian. That's from that point it's me. And they didn't dub my voice at all. So it's like, It's not even Armin doing it. From suddenly Weasel's voice completely changes. But it's like, it was so cool. First time out of the country and being in Rome and working with Ken Daniels, who was in the star of Attack of the Giant Leeches, and had been over in Rome, shooting films since the 1960s, and a guy named Robert Spafford, who played at the little apartments where Steve Armstrong gets kicked out of, and there's the old guy in the cage, who says, "Yeah, your crib has been folded." That was a guy named Robert Spafford, who I wasn't aware of it at the time, and he just seemed really familiar. And it turns out that he had been dubbing movies since the 1960s, hundreds and hundreds of films in Italy, and so almost every film that you see, his voice is in. And he's also has a very small part, but pivotal part in Once Upon a Time in the West. So that was kind of a thrilling moment. For me, it's like the people that you get to work with. It's the people that you kind of grew up watching and admiring, or maybe you didn't even know who they were, but you find yourself working with them. And I think that's the coolest thing of the business.
So did you get to work on Robot Jox on the same trip?
No, none on the same trip. That had already been shot.
Okay.
But I was involved in the scene after the robot falls into the stands, and there's all the mayhem, the dead and dying people in the stand. That was shot here in L.A. and over in Burbank at Burroughs High School, and but Stewart was directing it, and Mac Alberg shot it and stuff. But that was our little bit of involvement in Robot Jox over at John Beekler's place. Cool. Oh, I did spray John though on that day on Robot Jox. I found out that was the day I found out that there's a trigger or like a safety switch on a Hudson sprayer, because I accidentally sprayed John with about a gallon of blood. I wasn't aware. I wasn't aware of it. I hear people screaming, "No, no!" And I look up, and I'm drenching John with blood. So I was too busy touching up an actor, and I just wasn't even aware that I was doing it. So, oh my goodness, those are the days.
Makes for a good end result.
Yeah, exactly. I have a great photo somewhere of John holding up this shirt.
Okay, here, if we're ready to take a little detour here, I also, while I was going through your biography on IMDb, I seen you were also involved with under a low-budget sequel source to a 1980s cult classic, Alligator. Seems that you were attached to its sequel, Alligator 2: The Mutation. Want to tell us how you got involved with that particular movie?
Yeah, we were working at John's on an unfilmed werewolf feature called Shapeshifter. And we got a phone call from John Criswell, who had been working on Alligator 2, and I guess they needed people to come in for a night to work on the Alligator to get it ready for shooting the next day. And I remember going, what the heck, an extra $100 for tonight? Sure, why not? I'll volunteer. And went over to the Whiteman Airport and where the guys had their shop set up and helped put together this big giant alligator puppet, or whatever, for it. So it was like kind of a one night gig, but it was really cool. And then I ended up like loaning a lot of molds to the show, like, for casualty victims and stuff like that. So I found a couple of really good photos in Fangoria. Actually, one really good photo in Fangoria that displays one of the heads that I loaned out a mold to in the mouth of the alligator, and the guy had like such a pained expression. It looks great in the photo. But it was cool being involved in that, because I love the original film and managed to talk a little to Robert Forster about it when I worked with him for a day on a film called Peacemaker.
Yeah, Alligator is one of those really underrated creature flicks from the 1980s. I think could maybe use a tad of a remake, but swap out the oversized American alligator with a genuine super Gatoroid in Dinosaur. It'd be fun to do something along those lines. Maybe not a remake, but just a film along those lines with that and with the prehistoric crocodile. It's too bad, because I think with the sequel just went straight to TV. So it really was kind of I think it was even more of a remake of the original than anything. And I think the same director went on and did another made for TV with this like really just huge kind of awful looking Carl over and Baldy monster. It was like, it was really cool. And again, I then went straight back to John's like the next day. I just went one to the other, and that's back when I could still handle that sort of thing. Will you by any chance refer to director Louis Teague from the original Alligator?
It's like we talked a couple of times, I think, through Facebook, but again, I'm sure I asked him questions about that, and it's probably as well as his work on Stephen King's Cat's Eye. But it's like, you're right. The film's so underrated, and it's so well done, and it has such a great sense of humor. And I think if you do a remake, it's like you're going to lose that. There's going to be something lost that's there in the original film, because it needs that tongue-in-cheek sort of attitude to make it all work. And that film just really delivered. It was, Henry Silva was great as that big game hunter that gets killed. I'll have to dig that film out and watch it again.
Yeah, for anyone who's curious as to which character Henry Silva played, he played the egotistical big game hunter Brock, who ends up becoming Gator Chow towards the end of the climax.
Yeah. It would have been fun to work with. I'd love to, it's like the sort of performer I'd love to have a chance to work with. But yeah, it's a pretty quickie thing, but it's another resume filler.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Kyle, you want to hand off some more of your questions here while we're at it?
Yeah, well, real quick, I want to kind of circle back to Tokyo: The Last War. and ask, was there a lot of language barrier on that at all? And secondly, I know H.R. Giger did some design work. Did you ever get a chance to meet him or anything?
Oh, unfortunately, no. And it's funny. I think the H.R. Giger angle is actually from the original film, because I think for a long time I thought that he had been involved in our film, but I think through some research, I think he was more involved in the first film, Taito Monogatari, than our film. But we had but on our film we had Taka Ichize as our director, who's gone on to a rather prolific career as the producer of J-horror films such as The Grudge and The Ring, as well as their American counterparts. He also held, I don't know if it's current, how current it is. It's probably lapsed, but he did hold the option for another Creepshow movie. So as I remember that it was going to be produced through his production company, but who knows what happened to that, especially now with the new TV show. And who knows, maybe he's involved in that. I'm not sure. But, but we had him directing. We had Jackie Chan. Some of Jackie Chan's stunt crew were our team stunt team on the film. And so that was an amazing experience getting to watch those guys work. They were just fearless. And not only that, they were prolific drunks. We went out drinking one night, and boy, what a night that was. And then our stars of the film were two of the biggest stars in Japan at the time. Kaho Minami, who was in she's in one of the Godzilla films. She's in I think it's not I just saw it again recently. I can't remember which one it was.
Let's see. Is it I think GMK.
Yeah, GMK.
Right?
I think you're right. I think it is GMK she's in. Yeah. So it was. So that was really cool. And then we had the two recognizable stars for American audiences would be Tetsuro Tamba. Obviously Tiger Tanaka from You Only Live Twice, and also played Samurai in the 5-Man Army. He was in the film, and we also had Yoshio Tsuchiya from from countless
a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kurosawa and Godzilla movies, and
exactly, and just being involved in that film, just for those reasons alone, made it really.
Did you get to interact with that cast at all?
For the most part, yeah. I can't say, it's like I can't remember any instance where I had any real involvement with Tsuchiya or Tamba, but I remember them there on set. Because their stuff really didn't, wasn't really involved with anything we were doing, but Kyusaku Shimada, who played our or is it actually? Do I have his name correctly? Am I thinking the character name?
The character is Yasunori Kato.
Yeah. But he was in Shin Godzilla, so it was nice to see him. In a Godzilla film also. So, but he was wonderful to work with. I mean, quite the opposite of the character he played. I remember getting into some trouble from us being us talking somebody in production office for getting some beer for us from out of the refrigerator in the production office. They were stocked with Sapporos, and we figured we're wrapped for the day, so we deserve a beer. So had a little trouble because of that. And
so language barrier wasn't really
not really too bad, because everybody wanted to practice English with you, whether they spoke well or not. And of course. I dated a girl briefly while I was there, and that was interesting because there was a bit of a language barrier, but but quite a few speak good enough English that that you can certainly converse. And if there's a trouble, there's somebody there to translate it for you. I remember we didn't have actual craft service. We had vending machines, which was an interesting thing. We had, and I remember, the food being really, really good, and bento boxes for lunch, and which was quite an experience. And getting to seeing a lot of commercials and advertisements for Gunhead, which was in the theaters at the time when we were over there. And we never got a chance to see it, but yeah, there were Gunhead.
You're lucky.
Yeah, it was really cool. Never get to see a Godzilla film on TV though, so so disappointed. They were shooting one of and I wish I could remember the name of the show. But they were shooting, one of the tokusatsu shows in the same area, like we were shooting outside of Tokyo. The first 2 days we were in this location, they were shooting one of the tokusatsu programs. So we got to hang out with their, with the effects crew from that show, and they brought their portfolios and showed us a lot of really great, foam constructed suits, and we got to see, some of the work they had done. Stuntmen in the suits on wires with explosions going off around them, and so it was such a great experience. That was the day where most everything was being shot. Was the day that I forgot my camera at the hotel. So that was kind of a disappointment, but I refer that one just to memory now.
Okay. Did you have any interactions with Tomoe Haraguchi on that shoot?
Unfortunately, no. I don't think I would have. We were pretty sequestered. Of course, we were interacting with the crew, but a lot of times we'd be in our little prefab studio on location, building stuff, because there were still a lot of things that had to be put together over there, and we so that was a lot of our focus when we weren't on set doing makeups and stuff. We were in the lab building things. So which led, there was one interesting situation which led to a family try to get me to marry their daughter. Over there, so they witnessed me in the lab, and the mother put out the snare, but I did go over to their place and eat dinner one night, and I'd say that some of the best fried chicken I've ever had.
So in general, does that happen sometimes where we'll have like multiple makeup crews where one team has one specialty and one has another, or something along those lines?
Something like that, yeah. In this case, though, it was all George's show, so it was just us. But I have been on shows where we have multiple crews doing different elements. Like say on Freddy's Dead, where David Miller's crew. Or David Miller and his crew handled the Freddy makeup, and then we handled like everything else. So yeah, that's pretty common. It's actually a budget saving measure. Seems rather odd, but it actually somehow saves money by hiring more crews. To spread the work out too. So, but as far as Tato Tyson. Was quite a wonderful experience, going to Japan and getting the opportunity to work on a film like that. I'd love to get the Blu-ray of it that came out a couple of years ago, I think. So I'll have to pick that up at some point. But it's been a year since I've seen it.
There are some fan English subtitles floating around, so you can.
Interesting. I might have to check that out. If somebody can send me a link or something like that, or some information on that. I do recall, though. I mean, them coming to us one day with a sheet of paper with the and saying, "This is your name. This is how your name's going to appear in the credits," because they weren't putting, so I thought that was kind of cool. And what I found really odd, though, was they had Janice Ian doing the end credit song. She singing her ballads and stuff, and here she's singing this song that I don't even think it tied into the film at all. I don't even know why. I'm not sure. I think she was just really popular at the time in Japan, so they figured, have her do the, we'll license a song or have her do a song for the film. So
that happens.
Yeah, exactly. But from what I understand, the film didn't do very well at all when it was released. There was it was very, very disconcerting, but there were like a lot of child murders going on at the time in Japan when we were there, and they had caught the guy, and it turned out that he had a huge horror movie collection and stuff like that. So it just hit right at the time the film was released, and it kind of squashed its chances. So it was kind of a bittersweet thing, but it doesn't take away from really just how wonderful the experience was being over there and getting seeing the set. They had built a set that was, it was like Tokyo during World War II, and just looked amazing. It was just massive, and of course my camera. I was having very bad film problems at that time. My film had jammed, and I'd lost an entire roll of film, so I'll never get to see those again.
Well, you've worked on all levels of films, from small to mid-budget to big Hollywood kind of blockbusters. Do you have any preference over the kind of movie you work on, or is it all kind of the same to you?
It's like, sometimes it is the same because after so many years it becomes a little mundane. Lately I've been moving towards fine art, doing Basil Gogo style paintings. That's sort of more of my interest these days, although I'm telling everybody I'm not giving up my day job just yet, but yeah, I certainly can't ever say that I regret any of the stuff. Can you refresh me on the question again?
Just do you have a preference over working on bigger Hollywood movies and
I'll tell you,
smaller?
I don't mind working on smaller things as long as they have a decent budget, but sometimes they don't, and I take it on how interesting the project is. If it's like a challenge, I'll do it for less. It's not the best business practice in the world, but but like currently I'm doing a feature which I have 3 people I'm acquainted with in different ways involved, that were all involved in this project before I got involved, and they all somehow knew me through different means. And so I'm doing that for a really reduced budget, but I'm making 2 versions of this oversized cockroach puppet, and one of us has some animatronic movement to it. So I'm pretty excited by it because it's actually turning out very cool. It's really very old school cable control type creature. But yeah, I'll tell you one thing. I certainly don't mind the big budget films that have good craft service, and Demolition Man was a great example, or just they had the best craft service and getting paid really well every day, going down to the Warner Brothers lot. So it was like a really it definitely goes from the gamut of of how I have to approach it each time depending on the budget. But some of them are like really, it's really interesting films that I think some of the best ones I worked on were some of the short films I produced that they just had really good, smart scripts, and they were funny. So they were really popular, and I think that's what's fun. Although I tell you one thing, I certainly wouldn't mind sleeping on a mountain of cash.
Well, of all those films, is there a particular effect or creature or makeup that you are especially proud of?
I'd have to say maybe at the top of the list would be Python from the Stan Lee executive produced sci-fi channel film Lightspeed. That was a full body foam latex suit with multiple appliances and I had an amazing crew. I had a decent budget and amazing crew. The work that I did on the web series Camera Obscura, which I was also associate producer on. It was Jack Klugman's last project. And even down to films like Retro Puppet Master and films like that, which we got just to do a lot of really fun stuff, and we're given a lot of leeway and freedom. So, but the films that I didn't enjoy working on, I won't mention. So, well, there's a couple of them. So, oh man.
Yeah, the chat's not working for me, but I think I have a few questions that just came to mind regarding Godzilla and Japan. Sure. My first question is, how many of the special effects people and actors from the Godzilla series have you met throughout your career? And number two, what was your first meeting with Ray Harryhausen like? And number three, do you have any plans to attend G-Fest at any point in the near future, or have you already attended this convention?
Well, so the first question, obviously, I'd mentioned Yoshio Tsuchiya, and who else would? I mean, I spent some time with Haruo Nakajima. Both Maggie and I, separately and together, have managed to spend time with him. Which, I mean, even if that was the only one that you met, that certainly would be enough. And as far as refresh me on the second question, I mean, I like about the Ray Harryhausen.
Yeah, it was about what was it like when you first met Ray Harryhausen?
Oh my God! I was on cloud nine. I mean, he's such a nice man too. He's so friendly and he's so like easygoing, and he puts you at ease immediately. He has a very soft. He talks like this, and he's oh, this is very good. Or maybe you could try this for this. Or, give you some advice on something, or but yeah, that was. I mean, such an amazing experience. I'm so lucky I got to at least be in his presence a few times before he passed away. It just like I said, just cloud nine. You can't get any better than that. And the third question was, hello, you there?
Yeah, the third question was about the Godzilla convention in Chicago, G-Fest.
Oh, that's for the G-Fest. And, unfortunately, I never made it to the ones in L.A., and I haven't made it to any. I can say that I haven't made it to any of them, but yes, I would love to. I would love to go at some point. Both Maggie and I, what we should do is we should actually make plans to do it and then do it, because it just sounds like it would be such a such a great experience to be with so many like-minded people, and and hearing everybody's experiences. It's so great to hear everybody talk about how they first encountered the character and how they and maybe the first film that they saw in the series, and it's because it's such a shared experience. And that's really the best part about it.
And just speaking from my personal experiences with G-Fest, just this year alone, I actually got to meet one of the Godzilla suit actors, in Kenpachiro Satsuma.
I never met him. Oh, I'm sorry, I did meet Tom Kitagawa also, and I've met Ben Furuya. I never pronounced that.
Yeah, Ben Furuya.
Yeah, it's like, it's like I'd love to meet him. It's so cool.
Yeah, Satsuma's a very interesting character, just to keep it simple. I attended the panel that he was on at G-Fest this year, talking about his early life working in the steel mill, and how it prepared him for a career in stunt work and in suit acting as Godzilla. I'm sure Kyle could tell us a lot more about Satsuma-san if you'd like to, take over for that.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's a lively character. He's getting up there in age, but I mean, he's got more energy than probably any of us on this call. He's
sure.
Just very talkative, very outgoing. At one point, he had all the Godzilla cosplayers, and he was kind of instructing them on how to properly stomp and all that stuff. It was just
That's
a lot of fun.
Awesome. It's so cool. It's like, Maggie would love that. She has her Goji girl costume, and I'm sure he would be happy to to give her the proper instruction. It's it's who I met the director of Final War is also
Kitamura.
Yeah, Kitamura. Yeah, something. He's a really nice guy. It's like I really loved sitting and talking with him, and I know a lot of people bag on the film, but he was really, I thought, really a nice guy, and we had a really good chat. It's like I'd love to make it to G-Fest at some point. Sometimes it's either just work related or timing is just generally off. I make a modest living doing what I do, so it's it's like just the standard of the industry. So.
Yeah, of course, Satsuma-san wasn't the only he wasn't the only surprise we had at G-Fest this year. Another person that hasn't been at the G-Fest scene for over 18 years was the actress who played Miki Sagusa, Megumi Odaka. She was probably the most beloved of the guests that came back to G-Fest this year. I would say hands down. I mean, some people waited in line for like hours just to get her autograph. It was like, wow.
It's so cool though. It's so nice. I'm so glad that that they're they take the time. It's so important to people. It's the one thing I wish though is I wish we didn't have all the middlemen that were charging the fees for the autographs, because damn it, it's like every autograph I've ever given I never got paid for. So it's like and Ray Harryhausen never charged me for an autograph. But I never understand. It's not the performers themselves. It's the people, and besides, it's like they deserve something for for the time that they're spending there. But I got to start scouring the convention circuit and seeing who's going to be here in LA that I want to meet. I know that Satsuma was scheduled for Japan World Heroes. Was it last year or can't remember if it was the year before or whatever? But he had to unable to make it, so I missed out on that opportunity. So hopefully coming up in the near future, we'll get a chance to let him know how much he means to us in terms of his his just being the character.
It's interesting the reason for Satsuma coming back to G-Fest this year. It was to fill in for Akira Takarada, who was originally supposed to be at the convention this year, but he had to drop out because of surgery.
Yeah. And from what I mean, it seems like it did well for him. So that's really good to know.
Yep, Takarada-san made a full recovery from all I've heard.
Well, you know something, he looks like the type of guy that would make a full recovery. He seems so friendly and so outgoing, and I've heard just nothing but wonderful things about him, and it's what a lucky break, especially you imagine if he had played Serizawa, how different things would have been.
Oh yes.
The role reversals, for the two actors, it was just the right thing to do, and every of those characters is really so memorable. Even the most simple characters in the film are so memorable. But gotta love them though. They're part of history in our lives.
Yeah, the sad thing is Takarada is probably the only person that's one of the few people that's probably still alive from the original 1954 Gojira.
Yeah.
Everybody's,
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody, all the director, the writer, the producer, they've all since passed away.
Passed on, and but they've left us all something. And again, having I mean, I think I got to spend, I was on about three or four times I got to spend some time with Nakajima. But we had dinner with him and Linda Miller and Shinji Nishikawa. Pasadena was the Monster Palooza, I think. Just amazing experience. Oh, something I completely forgot. I did meet Keizo Murase also. And I'm also friends with Shinichi. So it's. But yeah, meeting Keizo Murase, man, what an experience that was, and I was broke that weekend. I was like, and I wanted his book so bad. I just didn't have the money the money for the book, and I was so disappointed. And then shortly after that, I was contacted about my involvement in the Full Moon book. It came from the video aisle, and they said, hey, we'd love some photos from you, and we'll pay you for them. And so I pulled about 100 photos, and after I got paid for it, I took that money and found a copy of the Murase book and bought it, and trying to be a copy that had been autographed at the Monster Palooza and had all the extras with it. So I managed to get one, and I just treasure it. It's so amazing to spend time, with the people that inspired you.
It's funny you mentioned Murase-san, because he was the last guest I met at G-Fest this very year. He actually had a whole display room full of props from the films that he worked on, ranging from Varan, Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster, even the Mighty Peking Man, which was a film that he did with the Shaw brothers. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I remember that. Just so cool. I mean, I'm so glad these guys are getting, the recognition they deserve.
Yeah, I just had nothing but the utmost respect for Murase-san, especially given the guy's very long career that stemmed back from 1950, from the 50s, and still actively working to this day.
Oh, I know. Yeah, he's got a lot of energy. Maybe I should have moved to Japan. It's like it's got to be something in the water over there. But it's like, I mean, just these are the guys that built our dreams,
and the dreams of hundreds of Hollywood special effects makers, aside from you, Jeff. I mean, I can name a lot of folks that were inspired by the guys that worked on Godzilla and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. and these are films that were at one time, looked down upon, and so it's, to see them actually, gaining the respect, especially after, the, remaster versions, just getting to see them in letterbox, really adds a lot to it. I was able to see, when I was a kid, they had a screening of his old Ray Dennis Steckler film called Lemon Grove Kids Meet the Monsters. It was one of his roadshow pictures, or live monsters, come from the screen and attack the audience, which was like a guy in a really cheesy mummy costume. Went up about 3 rows and then bailed for behind the stage quickly after. But there was a second feature, which was unannounced in the papers, and when it started, it was Rodan, and this was screening at the Alex Theater in Glendale on Brand Boulevard, which was like one of the big Hollywood palaces, from the 1920s and 30s, and to see it in a theater like that on the size screen, and it had to have been a 35 millimeter print, probably not the best print, but to actually get to see it on the screen was so impressive, because at that point, I think I'd seen Destroy All Monsters on the screen, and I don't even remember if this was before or after Godzilla vs. Megalon had been released, because I'd missed Smog Monster when it was released in the theaters. But those, getting to see those films, that's really where you get to see the work these guys, just how intricate their work was. They definitely deserve our respect.
Indeed. So I'm just more appreciative that people are taking the Godzilla series more seriously, with a lot more second credibility than they were, less, say 20 or 30 years ago, where they were still dismissing them as just, gimmicky films. In particular, Ishiro Honda. But there's been a recent biography that was written by Steve Daikaiju-fanboy, which I think more than anything has caused people to really recognize Ishiro Honda as one of the truly greatest Japanese film directors of all time, every bit the equal of the more respected guy here in the West, Akira Kurosawa.
Oh, absolutely, and who he happened to be, best friends with, and is, worked with him on numerous films, and became his main assistant director, after he sort of retired from the Toho scene. It's like, and you can see that in Godzilla. Godzilla has so much of Honda's personal stamp over it. I think, that's what gives the film its humanity. And that's what makes it so special. Because, there was the speculation, say, like Motoyoshi Oda had been, picked to direct the original film, it would have been much more like Godzilla Raids Again. And it probably would have, been a one-off, and, we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about this stuff. His personal experiences, and just apparently his demeanor, and the fact that he would have preferred to do like family type films, human dramas and things that involved families, but it definitely, you can see it in Godzilla. You can see that attention to character in the film, and thank goodness it did, because it's even with the Americanized version, it's very special. There's something about it that really is different, even from its obvious model, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. We really owe Honda a great debt of gratitude for taking the film as seriously as he did. As a matter of fact, everybody who took the film as seriously as they did. Yeah,
if Kyle Byrd wants to go on, he wants to discuss a little more about Godzilla and so forth here. Go ahead.
I really don't have much other than it's good to see someone who is prolific in the film industry share our love for for the character, for the genre, and I think that's awesome.
It's those things that inspire you. Ray Harryhausen, Godzilla. Just pretty much everybody. George Powell. I grew up luckily, I grew up in an era where my film history didn't start with Pirates of the Caribbean or Star Wars or something. It's when I was a kid, you kind of had to know everything, because it was, even though something was old, there wasn't like the stigma of it being an old film. They all kind of stood on the same playing field, and today there's a bit of pretentiousness. I mean, I think the industry's always been pretentious, but these days I think it's a little more than that. If they're going to hype a film, I'd rather be ballyhoo than the type that we're getting these days. I don't care if a film's number one or if it's an instant modern classic, or just entertain me. Just make me feel like the money I've plunked down is worth it. But so far, even maybe the most unloved Godzilla film, still I'd watch that over most anything these days that comes out. And yes, I'm saying I really like Godzilla's Revenge. It's like,
I do too. So
I think that's a fun film.
And speaking of All Monsters Attack, Ishiro Honda himself actually considered that one of his most important of Godzilla films, in particular for the type of story he was trying to tell in that film.
Yeah.
The social commentary regarding, family, which is something that he really valued.
Exactly. That might in some ways be like his most personal Godzilla film after the original. Because the plight of the latchkey kid, the bullying, and sort of and also about like sort of learning and growing, from within. All it took was a little help from Minya and Godzilla. So, and I think Gabra I think Gabra may be my favorite, final, last classic design creature, because after that they started getting a little more weird. They were going more into the Gamera type, creature design, which they got, they were very odd, type designs. But I think Gabra really, there's something about that one that just, it's such a simple design, but it's so classic. And I don't think he gets as much, love as he should.
Well, here's something to blow your mind, Jeff, because I kid you not, I got this from a Japanese source. The runner-up to Gabra was actually Megalon. It was called Monster Island Insect Monster Megalon, and that was the runner-up for Gabra, and they chose Gabra instead. So
no kidding,
there's another
really.
fun fact for us.
Megalon was really more of an earlier concept that they just waited on, I guess.
And I'm sure he didn't have that design back then. I think they just created that name, and they really liked it, and they kept carrying it over and over, and it finally got made eventually. Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, it's it's so wild though. It's like, it's a weird, but yeah, like I said, it's such a fun design, and the fact that that film was shot so quickly, and that Honda shot everything, including the effects scenes. That was, again, yeah, it gives the film definitely more of a personal touch.
Hey, got anything you'd like to say, John? You've been awfully quiet for a while here.
I have just one final question, if we have time, and it's probably going to be a short answer because it's a real long shot here. But I got to ask it because, Jeff, you said you met Harryhausen right around the time that Sinbad and Eye of the Tiger was released, and No joke. I actually hear that the next Sinbad movie being considered was Sinbad on Mars, and I just
Sinbad
wonder if
Goes to Mars. Yeah.
Yeah, and did you and Ray like talk about the future of Sinbad or anything since that movie was fresh?
Maybe I did. I couldn't give you an honest answer because it's been so long. But I do, of course I remember that. I remember Force of Trojans, which was being discussed after Clash of the Titans before Ray and Charles decided to announce their retirement. There was, I guess, Charles Schneer's son, though, did try to pursue getting Sinbad Goes to Mars produced, and just as recently as maybe less than a decade ago or so, because he hired a guy a matter of fact, another guy that worked on Carnosaur, Paul Salamoff, to write the screenplay for it. And I asked Paul about it a little bit, and he kind of looked at me and said, I can't remember what Charles' son's name is, but he said the guy is just a prick. And he said he's kind of glad that it didn't get off the ground. Which is really sad, because I'd love to see, if the son's going to carry on for the father, then there should at least, at least don't alienate everybody. From what I understand, Charles was a pretty hard case to deal with, but he put his money where his mouth is. So, I'm glad though, because after the that recent, which I've still never seen, the remake of Clash of the Titans,
that's okay.
Yeah. Although I did see part of the sequel, Wrath of the Titans on. I was on location and turned on the hotel TV, and it comes on. And I thought to myself, man, I wonder what asylum film this is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty much what it looked like to me. Yeah, Ray. I'm so glad I've got his signature. Got the photo of us together and the memories.
I will just say it is truly an honor for anyone to have actually met and corresponded with Harryhausen at all during their lifetime. And on top of the guy you just mentioned, Paul Salamoff, I'm doing a quick dig in here, and it turns out Carnosaur was not the only dinosaur-related thing he did.
Oh, that's what else did he do? He did
Land of the Lost, the 1990s.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I did a day on that over Kyoto Brothers too, working on a suit. But that was a real quickie. I didn't think. John Buechler directed an episode or two of that, I believe, or maybe more. It was too bad the show though wasn't as well done as the original. I'll still watch the original over the reboot any day.
I'm not sure what everybody else's opinion is, but I actually kind of liked the 90s series.
Yeah.
And the 70s series.
It wasn't bad.
Pretty equally.
It wasn't too bad, but there was something about that weird video /film quality of the original. They had really good writers too. And again, I love the original Sleestack designs too. It's very, very simple, elegant, nothing too complicated. But then again, the reboot, at least it got done. It had some really great stop motion in it too. So
what is everybody else's opinion, views on the Land of Lost 90s and original series?
As long as we don't talk about the film, the feature.
The movie sucks.
I'll tell you though, I did do some work for for Sid Croft. Marty wasn't really involved, but I was working for another shop, and this guy had done some work for the Crofts in the past and stuff. So, but Sid had hired him. He wanted to do a pilot for a show, which was going to be essentially like a rip-off of the Duracell family. So I sculpted up a design for it, and but I'll just remember Sid being like had the dirtiest mouth. It's just like every other word out of that guy's mouth was an expletive, and at the time there was like something about like Freddy the Flute from H.R. Puffin stuff had been stolen. They did this thing on Channel 5 News every once in a while. What's the fate of Freddy the Flute? What's happened to Freddy the Flute? Where is he? This and that. So I asked Sid, I said, what's the deal with this? He goes, it's all a fucking ruse. But he was a really cool guy. It was a really neat getting the experience to work with him. But it wasn't Land of the Lost.
Of course not. And just a few things here where I think we wrap up our just some fun questions here. Okay. Mm-hmm. Favorite stop motion monster movie, be it Ray Harryhausen, Danforth, or anyone else?
Oh well, so I think at this point in time I have to put this top of the list, Equinox. That being the film that like was my entry into the film world, and I own one of the props from the film, so I'm very thanks to Dave Allen. So
nice,
cool. Okay, now the fun ones. Favorite classic dinosaur movies.
Oh, what classic dinosaur film wise or?
Yeah, film wise, it can be good, it can be bad.
Oh, gee, it's like that's something. Anything Harryhausen. I mean, Guanji, the Alligator, the Retrospective. I mean, it's like, boy, that's so tough to pick. But I might have to say, might have to say some, Ray's. Maybe Guanji would definitely be a good one to pick.
For myself, in terms of if we're asking for quality, I probably would go with Guanji and 1 Million Years BC. But if I'm going with guilty pleasure stop motion dinosaur films, hands down, Planet of Dinosaurs. That's my go-to.
Oh, there you go. That's an awesome one. Yeah. How about the Mighty Gorga? That's
I don't know about that.
The T-Rex in it. It's like that was awesome.
Yeah. I say Legend of the Dinosaurs is the original Carnosaur.
Oh yeah,
there you go.
Oh yeah, that was Toei's attempt at catching in on Jaws.
Oh, that's a great one. You talking about Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds?
Yeah, I
love that one. I've got a copy of that.
All right, all three people that like that movie are on this podcast right
now. Don't worry, there'll be more out there. It'll find its legs one day.
It's funny that we're mentioning a movie featuring a plesiosaur. Toho and Hammer were at one point collaborating on a Loch Ness monster movie.
That's right, Nessie. Yeah.
That could have really been something. If John LeMay wants to chime in about the lost Nessie film.
Oh, I better not. We could probably go another hour on Nessie, but we could definitely talk about it another time, because I actually got a new book from Japan that has some new info on Nessie, so definitely in the future.
Tantalizing.
Yeah, that'd be best saved for a whole Lost Dinosaur Films episode. Okay, now we're shifting away from dinosaurs. Just your straight up favorite monster movies, past or present.
Oh, it's like monster-wise, just like again, anything Harryhausen. Well, Harryhausen's more creature stuff, but I prefer something. Gosh, it's so tough. I'm sitting here like looking at my entire collection, or not my entire collection, but most of my collection of films that I have, and I might have to look up there and see what I have as a clicky. I've got Half Human up there. Was really cool because I finally got a copy of that, but the American version. Something Destroy All Monsters. That one, I think, because it's got a lot of monsters in it. So.
Yeah, Destroy All Monsters was supposed to be the film that ended the Godzilla series.
Yep.
But it proved to be too much of a success, and so they made more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I'm not wrong with my assessment of Destroy All Monsters.
Oh, absolutely. Although, if you asked me about like spaghetti westerns, then I'd probably go on. I could go on for another hour or two about those. They're sort of my guilty pleasure now. Those are like what I watch while I'm working on horror films, is spaghetti westerns. So,
Spaghetti westerns. Interesting choice of
yeah.
to have his background noise while you work.
Oh, exactly.
I think guys, do you think this is a good place to wrap things up?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Well, anyhow, I think this has been a very entertaining episode of the show. We hit over 3.5 hours on this, so holy cow, that's almost a record.
Jeez, wow. I still got to go back to a sculpture. I took a little time off of work. I have to go back now, so get back on it. So.
But I'll say this was a well-spent 3.5 hours, having a great amount of discussion on a whole variety of topics.
Gosh, I didn't realize how a slow talker I am. Maybe I'll speed it up next time. Maybe make it 2.5 hours. So.
Well, since you've had probably the largest body of work of any of the non-paleontology guests I've had on the show. It's only fitting.
Yeah, it's a pleasure talking to you guys, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, Kyle, and thanks to John, Kyle, and Kevin for coming on the show tonight.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. It was a blast.
Well, thank you, everybody. I
Yeah,
really
thanks.
appreciate it too. It's really nice chatting with all of you, and you guys will have to. I'll have to get some info from you guys, so it's not all about me. So, so I can hear about. I want to hear about other people's experiences, but I got to run. So we'll chat soon, and I really appreciate it again. Thank you so much for the fun chat.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jeff, and we'll probably invite you back on for when we eventually do our big Planet of Dinosaurs retrospective, which I'm hoping to have multiple featured guests on. Featured guests including Jim Alpearl, the novelization of the writer of the novelization, Alan McNeil, and fingers crossed, the cast members from that movie, Max Stayer and company, if it all pans out. So stay tuned for that, guys.
Oh, how cool. Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks again for the really wonderful time.
All right, thank you.
Thanks you very much, Jeff. And from Prehistory, a Traveler's Guide, this has been your host, Greg Nuttman, signing off.
All right.
Take care. Thank you.
Yep.